Good evening, trustees. I'd like to call the meeting to order for Monday, November 23rd. Just as we start, if I could please confirm attendance. I'll start with those on the line. Do we have Trustee Archer?
Present.
Trustee Bingham?
Present. Trustee Archer.
Left.
Trustee Deeth? Trustee Deeth? We have Trustee Deeth. And for those on the line, I can hear someone's pans, so please remember to mute yourself. Trustee Paikin-Miller. Trustee Paikin-Miller. Trustee Tutt.
Here.
Thank you. So we'll move to those.
Here.
Oh, hello? Okay, so I'll just kind of go back. Do we have Trustee Archer with us now? And do we have Trustee Deeth with us now? Hearing none, I'll move to those in the room. So those in the room are Vice Chair Dango, Trustee Mulholland, Trustee Buck, Trustee Miller. We also have Trustee Galindo, Student Trustee Hessler, Student Trustee Zakar, and also myself, Chair Johnstone. And with that, we'll start with the call to order.
Trustee Archer.
Joined.
We'll start with the HWDSB land acknowledgement. The Hamilton Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on the ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined with the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt represents the relationship between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Anishinaabe with respect to sharing the land and resources thereon. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the long-standing relationships with the local Indigenous communities, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. With that, I ask you to rise for the singing of O Canada.
Joined.
So I did hear one other trustee join us. Do we have Trustee Archer with us now?
As Trustee Deeth. Yes, you do.
Wonderful. So we have both Trustee Archer and Trustee Deeth who have now joined us as well. So I'll look for approval of the agenda. I'll start with those on the line. I'll look for approval from Trustee Tutt, seconded by Trustee Paikin-Miller. Do I have any objections from those on the line? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just receiving a note. So there was a need to amend the agenda. So the amendment is to move up item 13, HWDSB Safe Schools Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review, as we do have guests who are phoning in and joining us tonight, and to move it up to, I guess it would become 6A. So can I have a mover? Trustee Danko, seconded by Trustee Miller. So that moves item 13 up to item 6A. So my apologies on that. So for those on the line, do we have anyone dissenting against approval of the agenda? Hearing none, I'll look to the room. Do we have anyone in the room who is, I guess, dissenting against approval of the agenda?
Sorry, Chair Johnstone, I'm not dissenting, but I just wanted to double check that Trustee Paikin-Miller is on the line, because she didn't actually confirm during roll call, and you have her down as seconding that.
Thank you for that. Do we have Trustee?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Thank you. Okay. So do we have anyone in the room that is voting against? Hearing and seeing none, thank you for the approval of the agenda. I'd also like to note that we also have been joined by Trustee Sege. So with that, we'll now move to declarations of conflict of interest. I did not hear any declarations of conflict of interest or receive any written communication. I'll start with those on the line. Is there any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none, I'll turn to those in the room. Any declaration of conflict of interest? Hearing and seeing none, we'll continue to move along. For trustees on the line, please mute yourselves. We can hear you or someone. So if you could mute yourself, that would be appreciated. We'll now turn to item 5, confirmation of the minutes, November 9th, 2020. And I'll just give trustees a few moments to look those over. Any comments or questions from trustees on the line? Hearing none. Any questions or comments on the minutes from trustees in the room? Seeing none, we'll continue to move along.
Joined.
And we just had an individual join us. Can you please confirm who is joined? We just had a trustee, I believe, join us. Can you please confirm who has just rejoined the phone call? So with that, I am going to go back through a roll call electronically just before we continue to move through the agenda, just to confirm who is on the line. Do we have Trustee Archer?
Present.
Trustee Bingham?
Present.
Trustee Deeth?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Paikin-Miller?
I'm here.
Trustee Tutt?
Present.
Thank you very much. So we have all the trustees online accounted for. Thank you. Moving along to item 6, correspondence, Equity Network Dundas regarding the equity audit. And I'll just give trustees a moment to review that correspondence. And I believe that, so I'm looking for a motion to refer to HR committee. Do we have, or a motion, or we could just take a motion. Is there a motion? I'll start with trustees on the phone. And I'll go through, is there anyone that has a motion that they want to put on the floor with regards to this correspondence?
I do, Chair Johnstone.
Thank you. Trustee Tutt, would you please provide the motion?
Yes, I moved a motion to accept the correspondence and that it be forwarded to the Human Resources Committee for review at a future meeting in terms of hiring practices, and that staff reach out through our Director's Office and Equity and Wellbeing Division to further explore potential relationships or partnerships with this equity network. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Tutt. I am looking for a seconder. I'll look to those in the room. Thank you, Trustee Miller. So questions or comments to the motion? I'll start with trustees in the room. Trustee Galindo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my view that this correspondence would better be suited for program committee, as it is requesting an equity audit, not just, so it recognizes that we're doing an equity audit already from a human resources standpoint, and therefore it's asking that we conduct an equity audit across the board on the education of students, as opposed to HR, which we're already doing.
I'm going to go to Trustee Tutt. Did you, is the motion mover, did you have any comments or clarification in return?
None. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Trustee, did you have any further comments?
Friendly amendment to the motion that it also include program committee.
Trustee Tutt, is that a friendly amendment?
That's a friendly amendment, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll turn to the seconder. Do you accept the friendly amendment, seconder Miller? Yes. So she agrees. So with that, I think you're concluded saying your comments. Turning to Trustee Danko.
Thank you. Through the chair, I was wondering if we could just confirm that we are actually already going to be engaging in a student census this year.
To the director.
Yes, through the chair. That's part of the equity action plan, and the timelines are for the spring of this school year. That is part of our work plan.
Trustee Danko.
Thank you. So I do see that they've acknowledged the audit that we're doing with respect to hiring practices at the HR level. We can acknowledge that we are already going to do a student census audit, which will be helpful in understanding the makeup of our students. I think there's an opportunity here with respect to who our students are interacting with when they do different things like volunteer hours and class placements and whatnot. And so certainly an opportunity that likely would be a good fit for program from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking to further comments from trustees in the room. Hearing or seeing none, I'll move to trustees on the phone. Trustee Archer, do you have any comments?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Trustee Bingham?
Not at this time, thank you.
Trustee Deeth?
Just a comment around, I do support this. I did receive actually a call from a parent actually in relation to this. So I'm glad to see that the amendment in it going to a program as well, because I think what their intent is to be in regards to how students and graduates are interacting with HWDSB students given opportunities. So I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Trustee Paikin-Miller?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Tutt, did you have any further comments as the mover?
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to a vote then at this time. Do we have anyone on the phone dissenting, voting against? Hearing none. Anyone in the room voting against? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Trustee. Moving along to our new item 6A, which is what was formerly item 13, HWDSB Safe Schools Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Update. And I'll turn to the director.
So thank you through the chair. I'm just going to pause a bit. I have messaged the Dr. Gary Warner, Dr. Jean Clinton, and Brenda Flaherty to call in. So if you hear a few beeps, that's them calling in a few seconds. So trustees would give me the time to have them be part of it, then I'll present the update there on page 13.
Clinton joined.
Welcome, Jean.
Thanks, Manny.
We're just waiting for the others, and
Brenda Flaherty.
Joined.
welcome, Brenda. We have Jean with you right now. We're just waiting for Gary to join us. Then I'll begin on page 13 of the package to give an update on the report. We'll just wait for Gary through the chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, through the chair, I know we will wait. I will begin, and I hope that Dr. Gary Warner will join us, but we do have Brenda and Dr. Jean Clinton, so welcome. If trustees look at page 13-1, I just want to give context of the report. Let me begin by first acknowledging and thanking everyone who continues to lead this this work and give an update in the timeline. I do want to thank Dr. Gary Warner, Dr. Jean Clinton, and Brenda Flaherty as well, Kiko Ojo Thompson through Kojo Institute, who's been supporting this work, as well as the experts with Dr. Kathy Short. Also, we have bullying experts in this area as well, Dr. Tracy Valancourt and Dr. Deb Pepler as well, who've been supporting this work. So what trustees see in front of them is a reminder of the original motion in May. What came to trustees were just themes at that point. And of course, the review panel did have to pause during the ministerial order and then re-engaged. And why we're here back tonight is to give an update of what's been accomplished and the additional sessions that the review panel thought were essential to add that were not part of the original scope. But as they were consulting, they clearly heard that other specific populations wanted them to return for further discussion. And I want to highlight that if on the page 13-2, you will see all the general sessions that have been complete, all the group-specific sessions that were complete, all the panel-only sessions that were complete internally, the online surveys that were completed, and of course they were delayed slightly because we didn't think during the school startup, the delayed and staggered start, at some of the sessions that was not the optimal time in September to be hosting some of these sessions. And then trustees will see the additional sessions that the panel thought were critical and were requested to come back to provide further consultation and input as these communities had processed the information and want to give further insight. In addition, the review panel made a commitment, and as I speak to many who say it's a very generous commitment, that they actually want to provide feedback sessions on the draft recommendations. So on the week of December 7th, they will be hosting 2 virtual sessions. In addition, a thought exchange that will go live that week where all stakeholders can engage in a thought exchange, give their thoughts on the draft recommendations, and then there's also a follow-up to our Student Senate session that's tentatively booked December 9th. So why am I in front of trustees this evening? One of the commitments was to bring the report by December, and speaking to Kika Ojo-Thompson and the review panel, and the commitment to add these additional sessions to the scope of the work, the panel had requested that they come back January 25th with the final report that will include a full report with a literature review, analysis of the consultation sessions, an analysis and thematic section also on the surveys, and also the draft recommendations that will be for HWDSB, for the broader community, but also some recommendations that will be at a provincial level. So because they want to make sure that the report is presented in a comprehensive way and they want to complete their commitment to these additional sessions, I'm in front of trustees tonight to ask for that extension. There will not be another extension to it because the work will be completed by December. And I think it's also important to note that they're still honoring their commitment that the draft recommendations the week of December 7th will be made public, and that the community then will have a chance to provide some insights to those draft recommendations. So through the chair, I provide this update on behalf of the independent review panel, and then the panel's here also to answer any questions, if there's specific questions to the report in front of trustees this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I am going to, this is an action item. So I am looking for a mover. I'll look to those in the room. Thank you, Vice Chair Danko, seconded by Trustee Buck. So that puts the resolution onto the floor that the final report of the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel be submitted to the Director of Education and shared with the Board of Trustees no longer than December 16th, 2020,
Gary Warner. Joined.
be reconsidered, A, and B, and if A is adopted, that the following motion be approved, that the final report of the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel be submitted to the Director of Education and shared with the Board of Trustees no later than January 25th, 2021. So I'm going to start with, I'll go to trustees with regards to the request and to find out if there is questions at this time. So I'll look to trustees in the room. Is there questions with regards to the request? Seeing none, I'll move to trustees on the phone. Trustee Archer, do you have any questions?
Yes. Is there a cost to this if we delay into January?
Thank you. Director, can you please address the question?
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Kathy Archer's question. The costs are being covered twofold. The ministry provided $150,000 transfer payment agreement for this work. And in addition, locally, the Hamilton Community Foundation provided $50,000 also to support any additional community engagement sessions. So that's why you're seeing those additional sessions that were added were covered by that additional money from the Hamilton Community Foundation. Their mandate on that money was that if there's further community engagement required through this panel that wasn't foreseen at the beginning of the work, those funds would be used to support further community engagement. So the total amount of that project, 150 from the ministry and 50 from the 150,000 from the Hamilton Community Foundation, total of 200,000, is being covered by those two sources through the chair.
Thank you. Trustee Archer, follow up? Trustee Archer, do you have any follow-up questions? Hearing none, I will continue to move. Oh. Hello? I'll continue to move through the speakers list. Trustee Bingham, do you have any questions?
Actually, I do. In the additional sessions, I'm not sure if what we're looking at here: follow-up session, community follow-up session, thought exchange, follow-up student senate. If that's in any particular order, because my question comes in with the first two, follow-up session, because the next one's recommendation. So the follow-up sessions with the Two-Spirit and the LGBTQ1A+, and follow-up session with Indigenous community. Is there reasons for those two, such as low response to it or something else, or is this also included in the community follow-up feedback on draft recommendations? I'm just curious as to these two in particular. Why is there a follow-up session that would happen?
I'm seeing some head nods.
In particular, or is it just there? Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bingham. I'm seeing some head nods, so I believe the director has an answer for you. Just before I move to the answer, folks, can you please mute yourselves if you're on the phone, as we are hearing some background noises. Director, if you can please address Trustee Bingham's question.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair and through Trustee Bingham, thank you for the question. These two sessions did already occur, but they were added. And why these two sessions in the review panel can add in if any member would like to. But we heard from the Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA+ that they had the first session, and depending on the facilitators, that they wanted, they brought in some other facilitators support that could create a safe place for people to share and open. So the review panel were open to that, and we found facilitators that represent the Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ community and helped to facilitate a second session. From our Indigenous community, we heard that that our agendas and timelines are, our white and colonial ways do not meet the way that they process information and the way they want to engage. So again, we engaged back with our Indigenous community to have another session that provided, that was more appropriate in the Indigenous way. And our review panel heard that feedback, and our Indigenous team supported that work, and hence why they went back to work with our Indigenous community to listen to their voices in a more culturally appropriate way. And that's why you're seeing these two sessions. It was in response to a feedback loop that the review panel had in place. And these were two groups that said, we'd like you to come back with different conditions that would be more appropriate for our group so we could provide you some feedback. And that's why these two sessions were followed up again through the chair.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham, follow up.
No, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I really wanted to hear, is the reasoning behind that, and that's excellent. So perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bingham. Trustee Deeth.
Just a question in regards to timing. If this is extended to the end of January, should things change in regards to school closing or remote, is that going to impact the deadline again, or will they be able to work through that?
Director Figueredo.
So thank you, through the chair, to Trustee Deeth. It will not, because all these sessions you can see December 7th and 9th are in the work plan, will be done, and there's a virtual follow-up. Those are all done virtually, so it won't impact, and there's no more sessions to have. So what the panel had asked then is, once they receive the further information from these sessions and the feedback from the recommendations and the thought exchange, that they need time to do the analysis and make sure the report is fully complete. So what it is an extra time to do the analysis and report writing, and to present that on January 25th. So there will not be any further delay.
Further follow-up,
Thank
Trustee
you.
Deeth?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Trustee Paikin-Miller.
No questions
Thank you.
or comments.
Trustee Tutt.
No questions. Thank you.
And I believe no trustees in the room had any questions. I'll just state that this is something that I can very much support. It is continuing to do what has been some of the most crucial work of our board throughout the year. I think that taking the time in order to follow back up to gain the voices of our community and to check back in, especially amidst a pandemic where learning and school conditions have drastically changed. This is an important opportunity for us to do due diligence and make sure that we get this very crucial topic right. I sincerely appreciate the work and efforts of the panelists as well as Kojo Institute. We're very much looking forward to receiving the full report. I know that it is not lost on them how significant this will be to our community, in particular to our students. It is based on the overwhelming outcry and response from the community, the participation in all of the consultations to date. This is a topic that has impacted not only the lives of our students and staff today, but for generations. We did hear from folks across the province, and when this first broke news a year ago, and I believe that there is an opportunity for Hamilton to come up with to identify a response that is Hamilton made and better serves our students. And with that, I'm very much looking forward to the final report. Director Figueredo?
Thank you, through the chair. I know we have our guests on the line. Through the chair, I don't know if I provided the response to the questions. If there's anything else through the chair that they would like to add to my responses, since they're leading this work, I'll pass it to you for that opportunity, and thank the guests for joining to listen.
Dr. Jean Clinton, I believe you are the spokesperson this evening. Was there anything that you wanted to say to trustees? You might be on mute. Dr. Jean Clinton? I'll turn back over to the director.
Yeah, through the chair. I don't hear Dr. Jean Clinton. I don't know if Dr. Gary Warner is there and to provide any insights, if he could. Thank you, through the chair.
Yes, I'm here, and I appreciate the willingness of the trustees to accept the timelines. We went with those timelines because we thought it was the responsible thing to do, and we will be very prompt in presenting our report according to the schedules that we have presented. The work is coming along. We need to check that we are really making the best recommendations possible. And I think, and we see this as an opportunity to be of service to the Wentworth District School Board, but also to other boards across the province. So this is it's really important that we get this right and do a thorough job. Thank you. Through the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll just open up to the other. I'm not sure if we have if any of the others from the panel want to comment. Hearing none. So with that, thank you very much, Dr. Warner. So to the, it'll be in two parts. So part one is to do a reconsideration of, or part A is a reconsideration. So I will look to, that item's already been put on the floor. So I'll look to trustees on the line. Is anyone voting against? Hearing none, I'll turn to trustees in the room. Is anyone voting against? So Part A has been reconsidered, and we'll now move to Part B, which is to adopt the following motion: that the final report from the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel be submitted to the Director of Education and shared with the Board of Trustees no later than January 25th, 2021. And so I'll look for a new mover. Trustee Danko, seconded by Trustee Buck. Make that easy. And with that, do we have anyone dissenting against this vote on the phone? Hearing none. Anyone in the room voting against? Seeing none, the motion does pass. Thank you, trustees, and thank you to our guests on the line tonight. So we'll continue to move through the agenda. And
Jean Clinton, left.
Brenda Flaherty.
Left.
Gary Warner.
Left.
So moving along, we'll move on to item number 7, which is Audit Committee Report from November 12th, 2020. And I'll turn to Trustee Danko to present the report.
Thank you. And through the chair, the Audit Committee met on November the 12th, 2020. We have an action item and some monitoring items on the committee report before you. So action item A, we have the presentation of the consolidated financial statements of the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board for the year ended August 31st, 2020. The Audit Committee received the consolidated financial statement for the school board for the year end of August 31st, 2020. 2019, sorry. And the KPMG, our external auditors, reported that the consolidated financial statements presented fairly in all material aspects. The financial position of the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board as of August 31st, 2020, and the results of its operations are in accordance with PSAB GAAP. The audit finding report was also presented. And the Audit Committee recommends that the 2019-2020 consolidated financial statements for the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board for the year ending August 31st, 2020 be forwarded to the Board of Trustees for approval. And you will see that report in your package tonight or online. For monitoring items, we also received the School Board Compliance Report for the 2019-2020 fiscal school year. Our staff presented the report and noted that we are compliant with all statutory regulations. We also received update on school board sector issues. Of course, the biggest impact on school boards is COVID-19 and the work that has been done to open schools safely and continue to monitor and implement measures to ensure student and staff safety was presented to the committee. We also heard about our enrollment, which is down from the original budget projections, and that this will have an impact on the 2021 board budget. With that, I would like to remove the report.
Thank you, Vice Chair Danko. I'll look for a seconder from someone on the line. I will have Trustee Deeth seconded the report. With that, I will now move to questions for audit. I'll just turn, do we have any questions for audit from those on the line? If you would just speak up at this point. Hearing none, I'll turn to those in the room. Any questions from audit for those in the room? Well, Trustee Danko, you've delivered another thorough report. So with that, is there anyone voting against receiving the report for those on the phone? Oh, I'm sorry, approving the report for those on the phone? Hearing none. Anyone against approving the report for those in the room? Seeing none, the motion does pass. Thank you, trustees. So trustees will now move on to item number 8, Parent Involvement Committee, November 10th. And I'll turn to Trustee Buck to bring forward the report. And I'll just give you a moment and just a reminder to lean in. Thank you.
Okay, y'all let me know if I'm not doing it the right way, right? Okay, thank you so much. Trustee Deeth joined me along with the Parent Involvement Committee on November 10th. Seems a long time ago now. Superintendent Bill Torrens gave a presentation on our remote learning school, highlighting elements of our elementary and secondary programs. Superintendent Sharon Stefanian provided some background on our terms of reference. A subcommittee will be struck to update operational pieces in the document. There are no legislative changes as of right now. Superintendent Stefanian also outlined the norms and values for Parent Involvement Committee. The committee met in breakout rooms, our first time on MS Teams to do that, to discuss areas of learning for future meetings. This will help the superintendent to set the agendas for, and the chairs, to set the agendas for future meetings in the coming few months. And with that, I would move the report.
Thank you. I'll have Trustee D second the report, as she's also on the committee. Do we have any questions from those in the room? Seeing none, I'll turn to those on the line. Do we have anyone on the phone that has a question with regards to the parent involvement report? Seeing none, this was all information items. So with that, do we have anyone on the line voting against receiving the report? Hearing none, do we have anyone in the room voting against receiving the report? Seeing none, the vote passes. Thank you very much, trustees. Moving along to number 9, Special Education Advisory Committee. And I'll turn again to Trustee Buck to bring forward the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend this meeting as I had a conflict schedule in my schedule. However, I will still give you the highlights. The Center for Success spoke. Staff presented an overview of remote learning from Center for Success itinerant staff. Video anecdotes from students were shared, citing benefit of the program to their learning. This program is available to all students with an LD, a learning disability diagnosis. Superintendent Sharon Stefanian spoke to enhanced public health measures, with Matthew Kwan providing an extensive overview of the current enhanced public health measures on her behalf. There were members' updates from Chair of the Board, Alex Johnstone, as well as Vice Chair of the Committee, Mark Cordipate, which I'll just highlight for everyone that he mentioned the process of escalating Sandy's Law to Ministry of Attorney General. Ministry of Health Canada requested meeting with the minister. There is a formal complaint with the federal government and possible class action. Lita Berry also gave an update. Michelle for Voice for Hearing Impaired Children. We also received updates from Autism Ontario and the Down Syndrome Association of Hamilton. With that, and the superintendent gave an update. With that, I will move the report.
Thank you very much. And I'll look for a seconder from someone in the room. Thank you, Trustee Danko. Do we have any questions from those in the room for the report? Seeing none, do we have anyone on the phone that has a question? Hearing none, to the report, is anyone on the phone voting against receiving the report? Hearing none, looking to those in the room, is anyone against receiving the report? Seeing none, the vote does pass. Thank you, trustees. Moving along now to reports from committee advisory committees. French is a second language, and I will turn to Trustee Tutt to please bring forward item 10. French is a second language advisory committee from October 28th. If you could please read the report, Trustee Tutt. Do we still have Trustee Tutt with us? I will look to Vice Chair.
Hi, sorry about that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought we didn't hear Here you go off the line. Trustee Tutt, if you could please kindly bring forward the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee report, if you could read that out, item 10 from October 28th, 2020.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's item 10.1 in our package. You'll notice there was a number of monitoring items there. Starting with item B, there was a review of the mandate in terms of reference for the advisory committee. And at that time, staff reviewed the mandate and the terms of reference for HWDSB advisory committees. Later, as item B on your package there, you'll note membership for 2020-21 French as a Second Language Advisory Committee. Membership was recommended for the 2020-21 French as a Second Language Advisory Committee. The committee required 5 new members, parents, caregivers, or community members to make up a full complement of 13 as per the terms of reference for the committee. And a student member will not be selected until the November 25th meeting. The membership committee list will be submitted to the Board of Trustees for approval on November 23rd, 2020, which is today. Item C, there was a selection of chairs for the 2020-21 term. Happy to announce that Galia and Kimberly Norgate were selected as co-chairs for the upcoming year. There was also a discussion, which you'll see there for Part D, which is the work plan. The committee brainstormed discussion items for future meetings. Topics for discussion agreed to by the committee included elementary remote learning, French immersion transportation, teacher recruitment and retention, program resources, and student engagement in French as a second language programming, and student retention in French programming in secondary schools. The focus on the November 25th, 2020 meeting will be elementary remote learning and grade 1 French immersion application process. Lastly, item E, there was updates. Program staff provided a brief update on 3 items. 1, new learning resources for French as a second language programming. 2, remote learning in general. And 3, the November 3rd reorganization. Mr. Galia, representing Canadian Parents for French, provided also a brief update regarding Canadian Parents for French's mandate. And there was also a document that was shared titled The State of FSL Education in Ontario 2020, which will be shared with the committee. That is the report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Tutt. And I'll look for a seconder. I'll look to the someone on the line. If I can please have Trustee Archer second. So with that, to the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee report. For those on the phone, do we have any questions? Hearing none, those in the room, do we have any questions? Yes, Trustee Miller.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering if that document, the State of FSL Education in Ontario, could be shared with trustees via email?
Yes, I believe it can, but I'll turn to Director Figueredo.
Yes, so I'll include it in this week's director's update. I'll just make a note of that, and we'll get a copy of it from Superintendent Bill Torrance. Thank you.
And for those on the line, there was a thumbs up. So with that, not seeing any further questions, we'll go to a vote. Is anyone voting against receiving the report from those on the phone? Hearing none. Anyone against voting on the report for those in the room? Hearing none. Thank you, trustees. The motion does pass. Turning now to item 11, Human Rights and Equity Committee report from November 12th, 2020. I'll turn to Trustee Miller to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So first I wanted to say a big thank you to Superintendents Bill Torrance and Peggy Blair. They committed yet another one of their evenings to sit with us and be present at the committee because Superintendent Stefanian was feeling under the weather that evening. So thank you. In terms of items from the committee that evening, there was new member selection including 3 students, 1 parent, and an additional community member. The previous year's co-chairs self-nominated themselves again and were approved unanimously by the committee. There was much discussion around how the committee could continue to support and further anti-racism and anti-oppression frameworks, specifically around anti-Black racism policy and procedure at the board level. I did make some updates around our motions to have our governance rules reviewed independently by using those anti-racism and anti-oppression frameworks as well. And the committee has reaffirmed their commitment in their recommendation to the HWDSB to create an anti-racism and anti-oppression framework to be used as a lens when creating and updating all of the board's policies, and specifically to continue to develop an anti-Black racism policy to address and response to specifically anti-Black racism within our board. Trustee representatives and staff are being asked to follow up and report back to the Human Rights and Equity Advisory Committee on these items. And with that, I would like to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Miller. So with that, I'll just ask if there is any questions from trustees on the phone. Or sorry, I need a seconder. Seconded by Trustee Danko. Thank you very much. So I'll start with trustees on the phone. Do we have any questions? Hearing none.
Hi, Alex. It's Trustee D.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a comment, and I don't remember on item B, trustee representation. Did I miss Trustee Maria Felix Miller's giving some information on what that was in regards to?
So you can see from the minutes that Trustee Maria Felix Miller had asked to excuse herself for that discussion. So what I can state is that the motion is from the committee report was for the co-chairs of the committee to write a letter to the chair of the board. So as chair, when I receive that letter, that would be shared with the appropriate parties as per our, in accordance with our governance bylaws, and then would be acted upon as such through that, through our proper bylaws and governance structure.
Okay, thank you.
Is there further questions from trustees on the phone? Hearing none, I'll turn to trustees in the room. Trustee Deeth.
Danko, yes, through the chair. Just for item D, noting that there is an amendment to recommendations regarding creation of an anti-racism and anti-oppression framework, regarding policy development and updating policies, and about an anti-Black racism policy. Will that be forwarded to the policy committee, and when would we expect that to land on their agenda?
So I'll send this over to the director.
Yes, so thank you through the chair. We know that the committee had already asked for an anti-Black racism procedure to follow the policy, but there's another component here, as Trustee Danko has asked. I will ask it to be taken away by staff and then to report back to the policy committee to give an updated work plan when this will be expected to be there, this critical work. So thank you.
And for those on the phone, there's head nods from Trustee Danko. Further questions from trustees in the room? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Is anyone dissenting approval of the report of those on the phone? Hearing none, is anyone dissenting approval of the report from those in the room? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, trustees. Moving along now to item 12, appointment to committee advisory committees or community advisory committees. Director Figueredo.
So through the chair, trustees will see on page 12-1, a recommended action that the membership for the following community advisory committees, the 5 committees that are in our community advisory policy and handbook. Every year we are asked to bring the names of the membership, and as trustees may know, some of the voting members are 1 or 2 year terms, and what you see in front of you this evening is an update from each advisory committee on the subsequent pages, from Faith Community Advisory Committee to First Nation, Métis, and Inuit Community Advisory Committee, to our French as a Second Language Community Advisory Committee, and also from our Rural Schools Advisory Committee.
Carol Pagan-Miller.
To be passed this evening. And if there's any questions through the chair, the superintendents who lead these, who support the work of the chair of these advisory committees, are happy to answer any questions through the chair.
Thank you very much. So it is an action item. So I'm going to look for someone to move the motion, someone in the room. Thank you, Trustee Miller. Seconded by someone in the room. Thank you, Trustee Galindo. So with that, the item's now on the floor. We'll turn to questions, and I'll start first with those on the line. Do we have any questions from anyone who's participating electronically? And just to note, we did hear Trustee Pagan-Miller leave. So do we have any questions at this point? Hearing none, I'll turn to those in the room. Trustee Buck.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking at the Faith Community Advisory Committee. I'm wondering why it is we have so many to be determined spots. If somebody could speak to why there are so many vacancies at this time.
Director Figueredo.
Yes, thank you. Before I pass to Superintendent Sharon Stefanian, who's on the phone, just a reminder to trustees, and Trustee their Miller officer can correct me, but the minimum requirement is to have 7 and up to 13. But to your question specifically, we know that throughout the year that these names can be filled, although we're committed every November to bring it here. If a committee has names to surface throughout the year, then those updates will come to trustees. But to that specific question, why now are there 7 with some vacancies? I'll ask Superintendent Stefanian to provide an update if she can, please.
Thank you, of course, and through the chair, thank you to the trustee for the question. We had a number of individuals who had an end to their term, and due to a variety of circumstances were unable to be in a position to renew for a second 2-year term or a second 1-year term, as we have some members who are on a 2-year term and a 1-year term. So the committee will follow the process that they have used in previous years. At their next meeting, they will establish a subcommittee to look specifically at member recruitment for those positions that are currently vacant. We do have an application process in which we reach out to our local community to look for individuals who are interested in coming forward, and then the subcommittee of members looking at membership will make recommendations to the committee on how to best fill those seats.
Further follow-up, Trustee Buck? For those on the line, that was a head nod no. So further questions from those in the room. Trustee Danko.
I had the same question. Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Student Trustee Hessler.
Thank you, and through the chair. In reference to student involvement in these committees, I couldn't help but notice the Faith Committee in particular seems to be lacking student involvement. The student membership, one is blank. Furthermore, for the First Nations Advisory Committee, all the students involved seem to have some relation to Student Senate, which is a pretty small group and does encapture a very small group of students. So it would be interesting to broaden that a little bit more. And furthermore, for the French as a second language one, the student involvement in this is small compared to the parent involvement and is also to be determined. So is there any movements that will be going forward to get a little bit more student involvement in these?
Thank you very much, Student Trustee. I'll turn over to the Director.
So thank you. I'll begin with French as a second language. If Superintendent Bill Torrance can speak to the next step to get student involvement and voice for that advisory committee. Superintendent Torrance.
Thank you, Director Figueredo, and through the chair. Currently, we have application process that has gone out to schools. We do have 3 applicants for a role as student representative on the committee, as one of the 13 members of the committee as per the terms of governance. And we expect that one of those 3 to be selected on Wednesday during the meeting at that time. Certainly the committee values the roles of the student representative and has reserved, although it's not in the terms of governance, it reserves one place on the committee for student representation annually.
And through the chair, if I could ask Superintendent Stefani to speak to the First Nation, Métis, Inuit, and the Faith Advisory questions for the student trustee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, thank you to the student trustee for the question. Beginning with the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit Advisory Committee, when the committee was initially established, the feeling from the local Indigenous community was we wanted to have as much balance in representation at the table, recognizing the incredibly important role that our students play in terms of bringing voice. And the thinking was to divide up the membership across representations from Indigenous organizations within the community that support the work that happens in our schools. Also to look at strong connections with our post-secondary institutions as well as the early years sector to support our students as they enter into the system, as well as our students when they leave our system into post-secondary, and then, of course, the strong presence of student voice, as well as representation from parents and an elder within the community. So the reason that there are 3 is the decision was at the time that provided a nice balance with representation from community, education, as well as from parents. With respect to the the Faith Community Advisory Committee, again, a determination that 3 students extremely important to have their voice and perspective. Those 3 individuals are selected from within Student Senate, and at the next Student Senate meeting, there will be a request to fill those 3 seats.
Well, thank you. Through the chair.
Thank you. So Student Trustee Hessler, did you have any further follow-up questions?
Yes. So thank you, and through the chair. In relation to the French as a second language committee, was there any particular reason for only having one student being selected? This is only just because in a quick tally, there are 3 secondary parents. There are 5 elementary parents and 2 that are a mix of both. So students seem a little bit represented there.
Director Figueredo.
Yes, thank you, student trustee Esler. I think it's a critical question you raise. And to give context to other trustees, when the Community Advisory Committee structure document was in the past, the previous board did discuss reviewing it and making sure that student trustees were added. I'll look for trustee officer because I believe that the document says at least 1 representative. I just want to clarify if that's true, and she's saying yes. So what happens is I'll ask Superintendent Torrance to speak to it, but I know at every committee, staff brings the document and advises them that they need to have at least 1 and they could have more. Then we pass that information on to the chairs of the committee to talk about the composition. Then they determine the composition. And as you see, that there's a range here, some who have 1 student representative and some who have 3 student representatives. But I'll just ask Superintendent Bill Torrance if that's the process that was undertaken by the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee. Superintendent Torrance.
Thank you, Director Figueredo, and through the chair, you clearly outlined the process that the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee has undertaken. They were determined to have a student, at least 1 student representative, and that process is facilitated through a memo to schools and letters of interest that come back to the committee chairs. The committee chair then, in this case, co-chairs, do bring that back to the whole committee. Certainly, if additional students wanted to apply via the community application process, they could be considered for a place on the committee through that process as well. However, I will note that we do have typically more applications and spaces on the committee as per the terms of reference for community advisory committees. Thank you.
Student Trustee Hessler?
Thank you. No further comments at this time.
Thank you so much, Student Trustee. Do we have any other further questions? Trustee Galendo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on a question that was raised by, I believe it was Trustee Buck, regarding the composition of committees and the selection process. In one of the answers, there was a reference to a subcommittee of members looking at membership. Is that subcommittee of members a subcommittee of staff at our board or a subcommittee of current members of that committee?
Director Figueredo.
Thank you for that. I believe that question is for Superintendent Sharon Stefanian, her comment, but to let you know, staff are not the ones who select. We support the chairs or co-chairs with a process, but I'll just seek clarification through Superintendent Stefanian because I believe it was regarding one of her advisory committees that she supports.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, the director is correct. The process is driven by the chair and the vice chair or the co-chairs in this case of that particular committee. And this subcommittee is a subcommittee of the advisory committee and staff provide support.
Follow-up?
So hearing that, I'm wondering if there has been any consideration to perhaps reviewing the process to ensure that it is equitable, inclusive, and has a certain number of turnover, because it sounds like there might be opportunities for, if members are choosing members, then we might just have the same members over and over again. And I just want to make sure that we're creating opportunities to have as many voices represented at these tables as possible. So I'm not expecting a response, but perhaps staff can take that away as feedback for future reference.
Director Figueredo, I'm not sure if you had any further follow-up to that or if you're just going to take the comments away. Director Figueredo?
Yes, thank you to the chair. I'll take the comments away. What staff will do is actually look at that governance structure, and if the document, if we feel there's something that should come back to trustees for further discussion and review for ownership around that process, then we'll bring it to the governance committee. So either it's silent on it, which leaves it up to interpretation, or there needs more clarity. So we'll take that away and then bring it back to governance committee for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a few more questions,
Yep.
sorry. With regards to the conduct of members on advisory committees, how often does staff review the terms of reference with each committee? Is it done annually or on a per random basis?
I'll turn to Director Figueredo, but I do believe that goes under governance in terms of that falls within our trustee governance bylaws. Director Figueredo?
Thank you for the question. I understand, I think, because I used to lead one of the community advisory committees in my previous role. The community advisory governance document should be the terms of reference for all, but prior to that document, some community advisory committees created their own terms of reference, like I believe French is a second language. So what we've done, because I know I was leading that, the community advisory committees, the document we ask all of them to use as sort of that broad terms of reference. But I have been removed from that for a while. I'll just ask if anyone on my team who leads those committees, Superintendent Stefanian or Superintendent Bill Torrens, if you have a further insight around any local terms of reference that the community advisories do create, but they must align to the governance structure document that the trustees actually support and approve. Superintendent Torrens or Superintendent Stefanian?
Sorry, and I do believe Trustee, just jumping in, I do believe Trustee Officer Miller also has a comment. I'm actually going to direct to Trustee Officer Miller first.
Thank you, and through the chair, the expectation is that the community advisory committees follow the terms of reference that are listed in our governance handbook. That is the only terms of reference that we expect them to follow. There are some committees that do create norms for their meetings, which is also used through a couple of them, but the expectation is that they follow the governance document that we have outlined here, and it's usually reviewed in the at the first meeting that they have of each academic year.
Director Figueredo?
Yeah, so through the chair, thank you, trustee officer. So really there's no need to go to Superintendent Torrens or Stefanian, but that's the process. So thank you for clarifying, because it's outdating my time since leading an advisory committee. Thank you.
Trustee Galindo.
I'm trying to think of how I can articulate what my train of thought is on this properly. I guess I'm wondering if there's a need to conduct a review of our governance structure with the advisory committees to encompass perhaps a standardized terms of reference that can somehow also be unique to each committee, but gives us or gives the committees the ability to not be to be inclusive and accountable more so than the current structure that we have now. So that's kind of something that I'm just formulating in my head. So I'm open to staff feedback on that. I'm also happy if staff take that away. And I don't think I'm going to bring a motion on that now unless my colleagues have similar thoughts or are thinking of something similar. Beyond that point, I do just quickly want to ask another question that's not so much related to the train of thought that I was having.
Sorry, Trustee Galindo, because I do want to offer a point of, I guess, clarification. So you'll recall that last month, trustees did pass a governance review. So the committee governance is within our board governance structure. So that's taking place. And the board review is from an anti-oppression, anti-racism lens. And so it would be through that review being conducted by a third party that would be hoped that would be included within that process. If at any time you did not see that part of that review, you would provide it at the appropriate time in terms of feedback when we get a report to the board. Does that help?
It does actually. You're absolutely right. I had forgotten that it was that it was a part of that. So thank you for the reminder. I appreciate it. So I'll still have staff take that away as feedback, though. The next question I have is with regards to the Human Rights and Equity Advisory Committee. I mean, looking at the composition of other committees, it's common to see whether it be faith affiliation or whatever affiliation people have, and I guess the hats that they're wearing at the committee, with human rights and equity, does staff keep track of the communities that the members represent? And I'm wondering if that informs, again, how diverse and equitable that committee is. So, for example, I guess the question I'm asking is, do we know if there's LGBTQ2+ representation on the Human Rights and Equity Advisory Committee?
To Director Figueredo.
Through the chair, I think I'll ask Superintendent Stefan to answer the first question around representation of different specific populations, equity-seeking groups, et cetera, versus answering, do we know if there's one individual that represents a group because of respecting people's identity. And so I'll ask Superintendent Stefanian, when this advisory committee has created the criteria and how we make sure that there is, as much as possible, a diverse representation on this committee.
Thank you to the director and through the chair. Appreciate the trustee's question. And yes, as part of the recruitment process and the application process, the application does indicate that we are looking for individuals who are from diverse or equity-seeking groups or Indigenous people, and individuals are asked to declare in the application process so that there is the ability for us to be able to look to ensure that we have a diverse representative group around the table.
I'm seeing Trustee Galindo's head nod. I feel like I have to narrate with the folks on the line, but Trustee Galindo, further comments?
I'm just looking for a follow-up on the second question there.
Do you want to repeat that for our benefit?
Is staff, do we know if there is LGBTQ2+ representation on the committee specifically?
Director Figueredo.
So through the chair, I'll ask Superintendent Stefanian to clarify without potentially identifying someone. So I'm just very cautious of providing specifically, it could potentially, identify someone who may or may not given us permission to do so. So I'll let Superintendent Stefanian answer that, if she's able to answer that regarding our LGBTQ community and representation.
Thank you. And through the chair, I will share that when we identify equity-seeking groups within the application process, that includes equity-seeking groups because of race, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, as well as Indigenous people. And we are confident that in our current complement, we are representing a diverse mix of individuals.
I wonder, Trustee Galindo, with regards to your question, if it's about how do we ensure that we have a diverse, that we're, I guess, meeting all of our, how do we ensure that we're meeting all of that criteria without giving away privacy?
You took the words out of my mouth. I think, so that's where I'm coming from with this is, how do we make sure that we have as many diverse voices represented at the table? And I guess, based on what I'm hearing, it might come down to the selection committee and the co-chairs who would lead that selection committee. I don't know if they've had an opportunity in the past to consider those factors. I know that other committees, advisory committees provincially, federally, and even locally in some municipalities keep that in mind is, okay, we have a voice missing from this particular group. We should prioritize that during the selection process of committee members. I don't know if that exists, but again, just stuff that I want staff to take away. That is all.
For those on the phone, heads are nodding. Thank you. Further questions from those in the room? Hearing none, I'll go to those on the line. Do we have any questions from folks on the line? Speak up and we'll follow that. Hearing none, we will go to a vote. This is an action item, so it's an action to approve. So for those on the line, is anyone dissenting against approval of the committees? Hearing none, for those in the room, is anyone voting against? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, trustees. We'll now move, we've already completed item 13, so we skip over to 14, school reopening update, number 7. And as mentioned, I mentioned to the director earlier today, we'll be looking to have a new name for this report in the new year, as we are most certainly already reopened. So we'll have a new title then. So I'll turn to the director. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. So as Associate Director Peter Sovern is preparing to present a slide deck to highlight the changes, I want to thank the entire team for their work, not just for putting this report together, but for leading the work. And as I talk to people in other sectors, especially the health sector, they reminded me when they would see me in late August, September, say, it's going to take about 3 months to get to a position where you have some stability in your organization around the new realities and the new safety protocols, et cetera, as you're redefining what education looks like during a pandemic. So what trustees see in front of them is update number 7, and we will be bringing an update again in January, not the month of December. And again, the name will change of the report, and there'll be different variables here as well. So on that note, I will pass it over to Associate Director Peter Sovern to highlight some of the key changes in each section, and team are available to answer trustee questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair, and for trustees who are listening online, I will do my best to guide us through the presentation slides and the references to the report itself. So I will just go from slide 2 again to reiterate what the director has indicated, that this is update number 7, that our guiding principles have not shifted from the ones that are before you. I'll move to slide 3. This is new in terms of our enhanced public health measures. As of the 16th of November, we will note that the City of Hamilton entered the controlled category under the province's Code-19 response framework. This did prompt staff to consult with Hamilton Public Health Services, and based on their advice, no further actions are needed in terms of our enhanced public health measures and our protocols. I'll go to the next slide and just highlight the 3 areas in red, as the other areas have no or no substantial change from the previous report. But just to highlight under H, access to school sites, in light of the controlled access or the red zone that the city has now entered, our visitor protocol is being reinforced at our schools, and that applies to all staff, all visitors to schools. So where necessary, of course, we continue to be in schools. However, where it is not absolutely necessary for individuals to be in a school building, we are heeding the advice under this protocol and limiting the visits. Under I for screening, just an update, as we've provided each month up to the 18th of November. You'll see there the number of student absences and the number of staff absences to date, those due to the screening. We'll just highlight that the screening is working, that families and staff are taking it seriously in terms of doing the pre-screening. One of the key enhanced health measures that we've been told is if you are not feeling well, in other words, if you're doing the screening and you should be staying home, that they are staying home. Outbreak Protocol, J, on this slide. And in the report, I'll draw your attention to 14-3 under J, and just some data there in terms of our confirmed positive cases. This was as of the 19th of November. Of course, today is the 23rd of November. That's increased. Two things that we wish to highlight here, and that is the incident proportion. So per 100, the incident proportion is 0.15, which translates to 66 confirmed positive cases when you factor in the amount of students and staff that we have in the system that are attending in person. That is quite a significantly low proportion. The other piece that I do want to highlight is that in the previous report, we had indicated that we were establishing a dedicated team to facilitate the work around positive cases. That team has been in place and has been working steadily every day in terms of positive cases being reported, coordinating with the schools, coordinating with Hamilton Public Health. And when I say every day, I mean every day, every evening, and every weekend. There are positive cases that occur and follow-up that happens. Trustees will be familiar with the communication that is sent out around each one of these cases. I'm going to move to the next slide. And so supports for students and supports for staff. A couple of points here just to highlight is that public health nurses are shifting towards supporting both students and staff who are returning from self-isolation with presentations in schools and really supporting that destigmatization of returning from a period of self-isolation. Student mental health and well-being, some data in the chart as had been requested through our previous update. To note here that when we compare the month-over-month totals for the month of September, the referrals to social work were similar, keeping in mind that we did have a staggered start this year. However, when we look at the totals for October, they are substantially higher. So we wanted to share that, and this is a piece of data that we will bring back in our newly formatted reports on a monthly basis to keep monitoring the referrals and the resources that are being utilized for student mental health and well-being. Part C under supports for students, student re-engagement, there are two key efforts that we want to highlight. The first in elementary schools, which is noted in the report. The first phase will focus on high priority schools, kindergarten to grade 3, with an emphasis around reading and math skills, and really we're tailoring that similar to the success that we've had with the Camp Power program during the summer. And for our secondary school students, we continue to monitor data such as attendance rates and looking very closely at the interim progress reports that were just recently completed. And as noted in the report, we will provide more detailed updates around the achievement and the progress to date in the next Student Learning and Achievement Report next week at program. This is also a piece of data that we will bring back as a key variable in the new year in our new report. Number 3, support for staff. We've just highlighted there, again, key areas where we've been hearing and responding to the staff need, whether it be around our digital learning environments, student well-being, and as well the second module in our Learn, Disrupt, Rebuild, is starting shortly. Going to the next slide, looking at number 4, and just to guide trustees who are on the phone, we are on 14-4, engagement and communications. A slight revision to what was in the report. The next thought exchange is actually going out in the coming weeks, within the next week to 2 weeks. In the report, we had indicated in the new year. However, we are ready to launch the next thought exchange in the next couple of weeks, continuing with the commitment to doing a thought exchange each month, hearing from families, getting their feedback on these important themes. Under elementary schools, number 5, just an update around remote learning. We did have a very substantial reorganization, as we highlighted in the previous report. That occurred formally on the 3rd of November, and at this time we still have a little over 9,000 students in our elementary school remote learning program. To note, though, for trustees, as is highlighted in the report as well, there are some class size pressures that we are monitoring very closely. On 14-5 of the report, you will see the class averages there, broken down by grades. And this is something that, again, we will report on in our future reports as well. The item B, transitions. So part of our learning through this first transition phase was that we had initially set out in the reports in the summer to have a transition phase occur in October, and then the next one in January, and the next one in March. As the director reminds us, we are dealing with very complex change here and dealing with evolving information that's changing fairly regularly. So what we did learn is that as we embarked on the first transition, we asked families in October for their indication if they wish to move from in-person to remote or from remote to in-person. And we implemented that together with a reorganization in early November. That coincided, by the way, with the first progress report. So students had a bulk of time with an educator, the progress report was completed, and then the transition occurred. As we learned from that experience, what we are going to be moving towards for the next transition phase, first off, as the director has indicated to letters to families, our intent is to minimize the disruption in the next transition phase and, if possible, not have a reorganization, certainly not of the magnitude that we had this time around. The second thing is we would be looking to have a similar type of coinciding of the transition with the first report card. So the first report card will be issued towards the middle or latter part of February, and that's what we're aiming for the next transition phase. So in January, we would be asking families again for an indication if they would transition from in-person to remote or the opposite, and then we would have that implemented following the completion of the first term report cards. The communication about this will occur in December. So providing families a lot of time to know when the key dates will be, walk them through any of the remaining glitches in parent portal that might exist for them, and so that in January they are ready. We'll open up the questionnaire, and then we'll be ready for implementation following that first report card. Going to item number 6, secondary schools, just to highlight here that we did formally cancel exams for the 2021 school year. and that is both for semester 1 and, of course, for semester 2 as well. A letter to families that included this information as well as some information around graduation guidelines provided by the Ministry of Education was distributed on the 18th of November. Just a follow-up piece around lockers, that a request had come in to revisit the position on the use of lockers in secondary schools as the winter months are approaching. This did go to an advisory committee. The advisory committee looked at it carefully and felt that in order to issue lockers, there would be the increased risk of the number of direct and indirect contacts the students would have with each other. The second point is that at this time, we are still in an adaptive mode so that classes are halved or in and around 15 students with ample space within the classroom to have any, winter garments that would need to be put aside. So locker use will continue not to be permitted. This is something, again, we'll continue to revisit, but at this time, that's the decision going forward. And a review for semester 2. We committed right from the beginning that as we established a model for our secondary schools in the adaptive mode, that we would continue to look at, whether it was working, whether revisions need to be made, and a team is continuing to look at what does semester 2 look like, and if any changes would be recommended, we will certainly bring those forward into your attention. Moving on to the next slide, so item number 7, and I'll just reference, we're on 14-7 in the report. So just some highlights for students requiring special education supports and services. A big focus since the last report has been supporting both students and the educators who are learning remotely. So those requiring these special education supports and services, providing them that added support. As well, you'll see in the report a very long list of professional learning opportunities that continues to be offered through this division. And the last piece I will highlight before I turn it over to Associate Director Zucker is on number 9, technology and remote learning readiness. And so this is on 14-8 in the report. A project team has been established to ensure that we are ready should either the board or a school require to be shifted to full remote learning for a period of time. Trustees will note that last week we had been hearing of the possibility of an extension of the December break. That we understand now from the minister is no longer something that they're looking at. However, the expectation is that we be ready if an extension like that is asked of us, if for whatever reason the board would need to be moved entirely into remote, or as I said, if a particular school would need to be moved into fully remote learning. So a survey has gone out to families asking whether or not they are in need of a device, whether they are in need of a device with internet capabilities. A remaining team is putting together a plan for the distribution of devices for those who are in need, as well as a full readiness of all of our staff in the established digital environments. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Associate Director Zucker, who will bring an update on transportation and the financial pieces.
Thank you, Associate Director Sovereign and through the chair. With regards to transportation, there are two key updates. The first being that, as we know, when we started the school year in driver shortages as that were amplified by COVID, caused us to be in a position where we, for the first time, had to do rotating cancellations of certain routes. At the time when we started this, there were 22 open routes. We are down to 6. So that is a significant improvement. Obviously, there are still students that are impacted by this rotating cancellation, and it is a priority for HWSTS to eliminate the rotating cancellations as soon as possible. Based on the information that we have from the current providers and the possibility of bringing on additional help, we are in a position where we are confident that we will be able to eliminate the rotating cancellations by mid-December. So that is good news for our students. It doesn't mean that we have enough drivers necessarily to cover every run. It means that there are mitigating circumstances that the providers are able to do to eliminate the cancellations. So we will still continue to work with our transportation providers. They will still continue to recruit, and we will still look at other possibilities, whether it's further run consolidations based on transitions, or whether it is bringing on other possible solutions. So that's the update on our planned, our rotating cancellations. With regards to the study hall and midday runs, as trustees know, we did make a commitment to review the data and bring back a recommendation with regards to midday runs. So what we did is we looked at all of our schools, and we looked at every single student staying for study hall that was transported. And when we reviewed those students, we looked at students that, even though they are transported via black and yellow, there are still some students who have the ability to access public transportation to get home in time right now, with the current time restraints with regards to midday and public transportation. So what that means is we looked at and we surveyed every single student who was staying for study hall that could not access public transportation in the time constraints provided after their morning in-person class to get home in time to do their afternoon classes. So based on that, we surveyed 380 students and heard back from approximately half of those students. And as you can see, the information that is there, 151 students replied that they would use and appreciate the midday runs, and 33 responded that even if midday runs were provided, that they would still continue to stay for study hall. There were 7 schools that were impacted by the survey, and in each of those 7 schools, there was at least one student that would want to stay for study hall. Therefore, we would not be able to eliminate the end of the day runs because that is our commitment that we would provide transportation to those students. And we're not providing transportation to students who would like midday runs. They just would remain at the schools for the study hall. So based on the data that we collected, based on the fact that we still are in a driver shortage, based on the fact that we would not be able to eliminate any end of day runs, so this would become a budget constraint. And we are, as we saw at Finance and Facilities, and we'll discuss it shortly, we are in a position where we are looking to pass an $18.695 million deficit. We are not recommending midday runs at this point, again, based on all of those reasons. With regards to finances, we did provide a very detailed report with regards to the revised estimates for 2021 at the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting on Thursday, and that report is available and the audio is available as well. What trustees did approve for going to board on December 7th was the approval of the deficit of $18.695 million. That is over 2%, which is the allowable amount by the ministry without getting their approval. So staff will move forward with requesting approval to go beyond that 2%. In addition, we haven't received any further updates with regards to COVID-19 funding. We do know that there is additional federal funding that the province hasn't announced how that will be flowed out to boards. And we do know that there is a lot of pressure being put on the ministry to provide additional funding to boards as a result of the declining enrollment and the budget deficits that a lot of position that a lot of boards are in. The revised estimates are due on December 15th. The ministry has not changed that deadline, and they have, as of right now, asked us to complete those revised estimates without making any assumptions on additional funding. So if there is additional funding that is provided, it will obviously change the amount that was approved by trustees, and we will bring that information back to finance and facilities and then to the board. So, and I will just say that when we did pass that deficit, it did include, even though we haven't spent all of the $9 million that trustees approved in August and then reaffirmed in October to reduce in-person class sizes, we haven't used all of it. We've used approximately 7.1 million of the 9 million, but we have budgeted the additional 1.9 million for future possibilities of, as we go through those transitions, the possibility of having to increase class sizes. So the entire 9 million is included in the $18.695 million deficit. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to Associate Director Silva.
Thank you. And just a last piece then on the final slide. And this is, as Chair Johnstone has noted, the last report on reopening, although we shifted the title somewhat in the last two reports, we do recognize the need to change the format of the report and moving away from a number of the operational pieces that have successfully been put in place over the summer and into these first approximate 10 weeks of the school year. The protocols are in place. They are having their intended effects. And starting in January, then we will be looking at other key variables around student engagement, student well-being, achievement, supports for staff, and continue to bring those reports on a monthly basis back to trustees. So at this time, we are happy to take questions. I did do most of the speaking this evening, just in order to expedite the presentation, but the remainder of Executive Council, who's not here, is online and will direct questions appropriately.
Thank you very much. So with that, I will, it will be a motion to receive. So to get it on the floor, I'm going to look for an individual to put it onto the floor. I'll go to those online. Trustee Tutt, I'll have you move the report, and I'll have Trustee Bingham second. So with that, we'll move now to questions. So we'll start with folks online. Trustee Archer, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, but thank you for the report.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham.
I don't have any questions, but I do have comments. And really they stem from parents writing in. After everything that has been done, it's so greatly appreciated what staff have been doing. And when we did the reorg, that's a royal we, when you did the reorg, I did have one or two people who ranted, and they put it at the end of their discern for what's happened, because their children got so used to their teachers, so used to them. And one in particular email that I did receive, it started out as the same thing. Just got used to the teacher. She's an absolutely incredible teacher, on and on and on. And then they said, I'm not saying anything negative. I'm just trying to tell you how incredible the staff is, each and every one of them. And they will be missed when they were shipped over to another area. But it was just, they really, really wanted to say that our teaching staff are amazing in whatever area that they have been put in. And that's a reflection on the exec council. That's a reflection on the director. That's a reflection on everything that's happened so far. So thank you for everything. And we really do appreciate these reports as well. It keeps us updated. So I just wanted to pass that on to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bingham. And we see head nods. Director Figueredo, did you want to comment or no? So it was received. Thank you very much. So with that, Trustee Deeth.
Thank you. And I'll just start off by saying, as per what Trustee Bingham said, is I'm getting the same kind of emails where, where parents are praising staff and saying that staff are going above and beyond. So I know it was a difficult transition, but, it was good to see that was happening. I'm still struggling with transportation, and I'm sure I'm going to get some emails on this. So we did the survey. So we had 151 who have said that they want midday, and 33 that want to stay. Would we be able to see a breakdown by school? Because I had a hard time hearing Associate Director Zucker. But from what I heard, I understand that there may even just be at some schools only one student who wants midday. Is that correct?
Director Figueredo?
I'll ask Associate Director Zucker to provide the update.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm just pulling up the data now. I will confirm, but yes, I think we have one school. Again, when we're looking at numbers, the school that only had one person that wanted to stay only had 19 students that had an opportunity. So as a percent, one may not sound like a significant number, but as a percentage, it would be just as great as possibly 10 in another school.
Okay. So my other question would be, out of those that are saying that they want transportation to remain at the end of the day, do we know if they are staying for the study hall, or are they going off somewhere else?
So through the director over to Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, the 380 students that we did survey were all staying for study hall. So we did not look at anybody who was leaving midday and finding their own way.
Further follow-up?
Well, sorry. Yeah. From what I'm hearing that students are saying that they're staying for study hall, but they're going off to friends' houses or elsewhere, and then coming back for the end of the day transportation. Do we have any way to clarify that? Like, do we know?
Director Figueredo, we have a response.
Do we know of those? Sorry.
Director Figueredo?
So thank you. Just to clarify, when we discussed this at the senior team about the possibility here, we spoke to the superintendents, the principals to confirm these were students that were actually staying for study hall and were actually eligible for transportation. So those are the students that we reached out and had conversations, but I'll ask Stacey, Associate Director Zucker, if she has further to add to what I've said.
The director is correct, and I know that schools do take attendance each afternoon, and we didn't review the attendance when we were looking at this, but it is students who are confirmed that they would be staying for study hall.
So is there a way, is there a way to confirm that they are, through attendance, that these students that are saying that they are staying for study hall, that they're actually staying?
So through the chair, yes, and I think that's the clarity, is that the students that were surveyed were students that we had asked schools to confirm if they're taking transportation, they're actually staying for study hall on a regular basis, and that's how we went about that process. So we'd asked our superintendents or our principals to confirm that they were actually staying for study hall. We know students do leave sometimes at lunch and then return, but these are students who were remaining on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Paikin-Miller? Trustee Paikin-Miller? I believe she's left the meeting. Moving along to Trustee Tutt.
No question. Thank you.
Thank you. Those in the room, do we have any questions? Trustee Miller.
Hi, thank you. My first question is around our transition date. I know that Associate Director Sovereign highlighted that just based on staff experience with term reports, that a mid to late February date is being considered at the moment. I'm just very concerned, to be honest, because we've now gone through a very large reorganization, and we've let families know that the next possible entry point for movement for their for their children would be around January. And I know I've already received questions as to when specifically that date will be. So I'm wondering if I could get some clarity on this, but also how we're going to navigate this for families who are potentially returning to work if they're moving out of remote, or vice versa.
Director Figueredo?
So thank you through the chair, and thank you, Trustee Maria Felix Miller, for the question. I'll ask Associate Director Sovereign to answer two things. Is how we're managing currently on a weekly basis requests that are coming in, and then versus the system-wide approach where we say, okay, now we're looking at how can we honor those requests, because there are requests on a case-by-case that are currently being asked, whether they're re-engaging back into in-person or they're actually asking to go to remote. So I'll ask Peter Sovereign to sort of explain how that process is being managed on a weekly basis as well.
Thank you. And through the chair, so as the director has indicated, what we have also learned throughout the past 10 weeks is that circumstances change pretty well every day for a family within HWDSB. We've been responsive to every one of those changes and a need for, under what we were considering an extraordinary circumstance. And it's hard to imagine anything more extraordinary than being in a pandemic and trying to operationalize a regular schooling. And so each and every one of those requests have come in. They go to the school. We have established a process where the superintendent's office is engaged. There's a conversation with the families to better understand what the circumstance is. And on a biweekly basis, we have made adjustments to either from remote to in-person, from in-person to remote, on a case-by-case basis as needs arise. So, and this is something that we had always indicated would be in place. From our very first updates, we did recognize that while we have transition dates, life doesn't fit into the boxes that neatly, and so we respond. The reason why we feel it's necessary to have a more formal date moved out to February, again, is from the experience that having the educator and the student together, having that reporting period time is quite critical. That we have heard from other families that, and I think it was highlighted just a few moments ago from Trustee Bingham's comments, that the transition is very hard. And so what we're trying to do is to take each one of these cases and situations and work through them to see if we can find a fit, whether it's in remote or in person. Keeping in mind that we want to ensure we have the physical distancing measures in our schools. And the other piece to keep in mind, as we've highlighted in the report, is that we are seeing some pressures in terms of our class numbers in remote. Early on, the ministry had indicated to us that we should have some of these formal dates in place so that families aren't continuously moving between remote and in person and vice versa. That hasn't been our experience. Our experience has been that there are circumstances beyond their control and they're asking us to take that into consideration, which we have. So for those reasons, we feel that moving the formal date out to February with a longer period of time to let families know about the dates and the process in December, and using January to, again, ask families if they do want to transition, that we'll be able to accommodate as many as possible.
Director Figueredo.
Another piece I think is very important. We do not want to reorganize like last time, and we hope by then it gives us a little more time to see if the ministry will be funding our board and all boards based on their projection enrollment numbers in the spring, based on the actuals. I know a motion was passed last board meeting for board to advocate and pursue. And we hope that by then we have an answer, and if we do get extra funding, that will allow us more flexibility to add teachers if people shift versus trying to reorganize, which we do not want to do. So that's just another variable I wanted to share through the chair.
Trustee Miller?
Thank you so much for both of those responses. I still have concerns around particularly what Associate Director Salvin just highlighted as pressure points. So in the event that a family reaches out needing to be moved back to in-person classes, but they cannot, essentially we know what happened in October. You know, we lost many in-person educators because we needed them in remote, and now I'm concerned that, and I believe I actually addressed this back in the summer, that we were going to find ourselves in a position where we didn't have that wiggle room of 1 or 2 students to add to a class without needing a whole new class. And then we obviously can't make a whole new class for just a single student, so does that mean that now we're asking other families to take on another transition in order to allocate families who cannot continue in the mode that they are currently in indefinitely or even until February. So I'm wondering if perhaps we could just, if staff could highlight exactly how we're dealing with families who need accommodations in person, but can't be accommodated in their immediate school. Is transportation being provided in a situation like that? What will a family have a choice of schools? I would love an answer on that, please. Thank you.
Director Figueredo.
I'll start through the chair and then ask Associate Director Peter Sovereign to add. right now what the trustees have provided with their current motion, if we're feeling that there are requests that we're trying to provide for parents who want to come back in person, then, and there's space, then we'll proceed accordingly. And our goal is always in the homeschool. But if we're finding that there's a pressure point, the funds, 7.1 million that have spent 9 million, allow us to consider by adding another teacher in that school if need be, and if the parent can't wait till the next transitional point. But I just wanted to put that high level, that flexibility that trustees have given us, allow us to sort of monitor the in-person portion. But we flag as the pressure point is that there's tends to be more requests going to remote, and that's why we flagged sort of the class averages that we're a little starting to get concerned about especially in the upper grades there. Well, as Associate Director Sofran, just to sort of highlight how we're managing it, but I believe it is in each homeschool, and we do look at extra staff if we need to through that 9 million if we can't maintain the distance. Associate Director.
Thank you, Director, and through the chair. So to date, we have, I'm pleased to say, been able to accommodate all the requests, and that is through the efforts of our principals, our superintendents, the supports that we have additionally provided for the remote learning, so that not only are we finding the space, but we're also aiming to do it in as quick of a time period as possible. By shifting the transition date, I think we are signaling really, as the director has said, we don't want to be in a disruptive mode of needing to reorganize. We do hope that there are additional funds that may arrive to support us. And in the meantime, we don't want to send a message that if your circumstance is such that you need to move from remote to in-person or from in-person to remote, that we won't be able to accommodate. In fact, we're doing that. And so for those reasons, we felt that having a date in early January would actually be a bit disingenuous because we are meeting the needs as they are arising right now.
Okay, thank you so much. Just one final question. I know here that we have had no additional funds provided by the Ministry of Education since our last report. The ministry, as far as I understand it, has had access to federal funds that it has received. And I'm curious as to whether there's an opportunity here for us to appeal directly to the federal government for our portion of the funds, or to another source for additional funds, because $18 million is quite the deficit. So I don't know if that's a comment. I don't know if I perhaps can get some staff guidance or.
So just before we go to that, because that's more political, but we do have a motion on the books that came through Finance and Facilities to appeal to the ministry in order to allow us to gain access specifically to the federal funding portion, which we estimate to be approximately $500,000, so $500,000. And with that, the motion was also passed that we appeal for additional funding for supply coverage of our staff, as well as additional funding with regards to our being funded for our projections rather than our actuals. I do believe there may be a motion coming up tonight. I have heard such things, but if there is a motion, I would be looking for that. But we will turn to, perhaps we can turn that question over to staff in that I'll just ask just very generally through the director if there is any comments with regards to funding.
So I just would say that the Finance Facilities Committee report is going to be fulsome discussion on December 7th. So I think that's the time to really unpack that whole deficit piece. And I know Associate Director Zucker and the chair of the committee can support us through that conversation. In terms of the portion of our federal funding, the second wave of 50 million was only 35 million of that was distributed just to those boards in Peel, York, Ottawa, and Toronto. There's still 15 million. We've been advocating when we can expect to receive those funds because there is pressure points and every bit will help. And in addition, I know a survey has been done by the ministry to highlight what other pressure points and two themes come across the province. One about our projections and that not funding us based on our projections and our actuals is a COVID-19 related reality. And if we're going to honor parent choice, which we want to not fund based on that is taking away our challenge to manage parent choice. So a survey has gone out, and the other piece we did talk about was the increase in replacement costs in terms of people self-screening. That's a COVID-19 related cost, and they should self-screen, not come to work. We are hearing that we should be hearing something very soon in the month of December from my contacts. But if we don't hear anything soon, by December 7th, we will be staff will be bringing an update in terms of what further advocacy we might need from the board at that time, through the chair.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
Thank you. I appreciate that response, and I look forward to that discussion very much. Thank you. I'm all done.
Thank you. Further questions? Trustee Danko?
Thank you. And Trustee Miller asked one of my key questions, so I appreciate all of the responses around the transition date. And I also wanted to flag that some families have been waiting and have been planning for a January transition date. So I see that communication on the process will happen in December. I'm wondering how early that can go out so families can perhaps adjust their plans or recognize that there's another way that they can look at the transition through the chair.
Director Figueiredo.
So I'll pass on to Associate Director Peter Sovereign for how early in December and what the communication currently is if individual circumstances change between now and February for families. Associate Director.
Thank you, and through the chair. So when we do a follow-up communication from the board meeting from this evening that goes out to families tomorrow, we will be indicating at that time what we've highlighted in terms of the shift, that in fact we will also highlight should your circumstances be such that you do need to move from remote to in-person or in-person to remote, reach out to your school, have a conversation with your principal, the superintendent's office will be involved, that we are being responsive at this time. So that communication will start tomorrow, and then following that in about a week's time or so, which will bring us to early December, we will have the process posted.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm going to jump around to a couple of different questions. Regarding the absence numbers for students, the 3,723, do we know how that compares to an average year at this time? And have we had any feedback from our educators on any impacts on student learning and achievement or well-being?
Director Figueiredo.
Yeah, before I pass to Associate Director, I know, just to clarify what that number is, that is the number of total cumulative student absences related to self-screening, not the total absences, because we have codes for that. I think what you'll see in the January report will bring further analysis. That'll be one of the variables. How is student attendance overall compared to previous year in the same time period? And then also disaggregate how many of those are related just to COVID self-screening numbers, but I'll pass to Associate Director Sovereign if I've captured that.
Thank you, through the chair. You've captured it.
Thank you. Through the chair, so I'll look to see if we get feedback from educators on the impacts of students staying home in January. Regarding the outbreak protocol, I wanted to acknowledge the work that public health and staff have been doing. I believe we have someone on call at all hours, given the notifications that we get, and just wanted to acknowledge that work that's been happening and how efficient it is, and how well we're communicating with families. I'm seeing a lot of feedback from families saying that they're feeling more secure in sending their children to their schools, knowing that we're managing this well and communicating very timely. With regards to social work referrals, seeing that bump in October is quite significant. Are we at this point able to support all of the referrals with our current level of staffing?
Director Figueredo through Director Figueredo over to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm actually going to ask Superintendent Stefanian, who's online, to speak directly to that as social work as part of her portfolio.
Thank you to the trustee for the question and through the chair. So even with the increase that we're seeing currently, we are in a position where we are able to meet the increase in demand. There were some additional funds specifically connected to mental health and well-being and COVID that came forward from the provincial government and the federal government. So we were able to add some additional staff to support. Those funds came through in the springtime. So at present, even with the increased numbers, we are able to manage and to meet the demand.
Wonderful, thank you. With regards to the parent engagement event that's focusing on remote learning, is that an opportunity for any parent to participate and learn, or is it really just for remote families and very focused on that? I'm just noticing there's a few things that could benefit any family.
Through the director over to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm going to ask Superintendent Bill Torrens to speak to this part.
Thank you, and through the chair, the session will be a live link that is available to anyone who is interested in participating.
Thank you, and through the chair, that's great news. Then quickly, we mentioned secondary lockers. Has there been any discussion around elementary lockers, given there are more students in a class and less space for their belongings? Through Director over to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair. So this is something that we have both an elementary and a secondary school advisory committee that are looking at various operational issues. So we will take that away. I don't have an answer right now as to whether they've looked at elementary lockers.
Thank you. And just to finish, I want to potentially put a motion on the floor for trustees to consider. We've heard that there are some pressure points emerging with the transitions to remote classrooms. And right now we do have $9 million of reserve funds that are allocated for reducing in-person class sizes to support 1 meter distancing, and we've provided an additional focus on supporting our high priority schools. And so I would like to move to see if trustees are interested in supporting this. If those conditions are met, if we can maintain our 1 meter distancing in our physical classes, we've supported our high priority schools, then that staff be authorized to use part of the remaining reserves to to also minimize the impacts of transitions to remote classes by adding classes as necessary as this trend continues. Through the chair.
Thank you. I think for this meeting, I think I want to wrap up the current questions and then we'll come back to the motion because I just want to finish this conversation. I noted that we had Trustee Buck that wanted to ask questions. Was there anyone else that wanted, and Student Trustee Hessler? So we'll wrap up that and come right back. Trustee Buck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I'm going to try and articulate myself well. So if I'm not making sense, please give me a thumbs down. Okay, so a few questions around transitions. I don't see explicitly stated here in the report, but are we looking at eliminating the third transition?
Director Figueredo?
Through the chair, that's a great question. We haven't done so yet, but that is actually a question that's been on the table. If we do delay it till February, and we can get additional funding that we can deal with the one-off requests, one of our concerns is by having a third one, it would be in the middle of an assessment and evaluation reporting. So it becomes very difficult when a student moves staff members or a teacher when a teacher has assessed half of the term and then the other half. Right now, we haven't made that, but we'll bring an update in the January report. And by then, we'll know what kind of funding we'll have from the ministry that might allow us the ongoing flexibility that this next transition might suffice. And we'll also know the numbers of this transition. We'll actually know how many people are requesting it. So it is something on the table we're considering, but haven't made any final decision yet.
Trustee Buck?
Thank you for that answer. I am pleased to know that we're discussing possibly eliminating that third day. The disruption this past fall was substantial, and I don't think that, I think that when we have the possibility of a reorganization, I would assume on a much smaller scale, but that would still be quite disruptive. We need to look at all of the factors there, what that could mean, as the director had spoken to during an assessment phase of that teachers are working through with their students. The mental health and well-being, that was something that we heard over and over again in emails and phone calls with parents during the fall. So thank you for having those conversations. I know that's a tough conversation. I'd also like to acknowledge that it's been mentioned that families were expecting those 2 other transition days. So they could have made plans. Also, we all have to be expecting things can just topple over and onto their head at a moment's notice these days. So there's lots of opportunity for families, individual circumstances to change. So not an easy decision one way or the other, but when we look at the mostly organized chaos of the fall, I think that it's wise for us to be looking at limiting ourselves to just one more transition day. I did want to ask a question for clarification, so bear with me because I'm trying to understand, or I'm not sure I'll be able to articulate it well, but in a regular year, we have two count days. After a count day, correct me if I'm wrong, if a student moves into a catchment where their grade is full, we would not have a reorg triggered, correct?
Director Figueredo?
Through the chair, that is correct. What at times we do with contingency lines, if throughout the year we then see a number or classroom that's grown, and we're concerned, then we might add an additional teacher, but the only reorg we do is the end of September, early October for our elementary schools.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to be certain. So in the circumstances where if we were to have a substantial number of students go past whatever that class size limit is supposed to be, are we still looking at possible reorgs on obviously a much smaller scale than we saw in the fall? But will we potentially have more of this happening? Or is it possible for us just to have, if space is physically possible in the classroom to maintain those 1 meter distances, just to have more kids in the classroom to help eliminate the need for more reorgs?
Director Figueredo?
Through the chair, it's the latter. This year makes it more complex, of course, because the 1 meter distance. But as we deal with individual circumstance, the first question is, do we have space in the in-person if someone's requesting to come in where we can still maintain 1 meter? And if we're getting too many requests at a school, can we dip into the 9 million? And that's the flexibility the board has provided. So, and then to be clear that our collective agreement that we with ADFO is one reorganization every fall. So when I say that the only way we would even want to entertain is if there is such a request to transition one way, that the only way we can do it without additional funding to meet parent choice is to reorg. We do not want to do that. But I just want to preface, though, even if you add a teacher, which is always a good thing, to a school or to remote, at times you still have to shift students if you're adding another teacher to a school. Yes, our collective agreement only permits one time a year, and that's why the funding from the ministry will be critical to honor parent choice.
Further follow-up?
Thank you very much for that clarification. I do have one more question. Let me see if I can read my writing. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears to transportation. With the weather having now turned, winter is upon us. They promised it would come, and it came. Have we had a significant number of families who had opted out of transportation this year now choose to take busing again?
Dr. Figueredo.
So I think I'll ask Associate Director Zucker to answer that, whether now the winter season is closely upon us, are there more parents now saying, I want transportation and I opted out, now I want to opt in? To Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, Director, and through the chair. At this time, we have not heard those requests, but it is possible that something would be coming. We did have transition opt-in and out dates, which matched up with our opt-in and out of remote learning dates. So it is something that we can consider, whether those two dates have to coincide or not, and look at whether we would be keeping the January date or moving it to the date in February as well. And obviously, as circumstances arise and if there is space on the buses at that time, it is possible to do it outside of the transition date.
So just to clarify, it similarly to what we're seeing in our classrooms as numbers shift, it would kind of be on a case-by-case basis at this point if families were to be able to opt back into transportation.
So that just for the trustees on the line, the question is that it would be on a case-by-case basis if a family needed to opt in. Associate Director Zucker, if you can just confirm confirm that.
Thank you, and through the chair, that's correct if it is outside of the timelines that we've provided for opting in and out.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Trustee Hessler.
Yes. So thank you, and through the chair. If I could draw your attention to item 14-6. Point A is exam cancellation and graduation requirements. So within this statement here, the cancellation of exams is good. However, there's a clause in here that teachers will use their professional judgment to decide on the appropriate activities to allow students to demonstrate their learning. With this, I feel it opens up a lot of variance to students' marks. So with the inclusion of this clause, teachers, in a sense, could create an exam and only have it as a culminating task, which means for some students, exams would not be canceled since they are still having to do a test of that proportion. So if we could provide a little more outline to specifically what students can do in their marking of courses, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. And I'll move through to the director, and if clarification can be provided with regards to operationalizing under the Ed Act, as well as how the definition is provided in terms of professional responsibility and background education on that, just so that everyone here in the room listening, but also viewers would be able to understand so that you're providing that background and context and education for everyone. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'll ask Associate Directors Peter Sovereign to speak to it, but thank you, Student Trustee, for your question. What drives this is the ministry's policy on growing success, which is a policy for all boards in terms of the flexibility teachers have in their professional judgment. And even prior to this year, although we've canceled the final exams during that exam period, which you're identifying, your concern is that there could be assessments or tests of the same type of nature outside of that window that could be counted as an alternative activity, is what I think I'm hearing. So I'll ask Associate Director Peter Sovereign to speak about what we've been communicating to schools and trying to support the schools with this.
Thank you, Director. And through the chair, I think the director's captured it very well, but I will ask Superintendent Bill Torrens, who's been leading this work as part of his portfolio responsibility, to speak directly to the memo that was issued to schools.
Thank you, and through the chair, pardon me, we provided specific direction to schools that exams were not to occur, and the exam period was to be used for student success activities that were designed to ensure that students had additional opportunities to complete tasks or assignments and therefore earn the credits. In terms of professional judgment, as described by Director Figueredo, staff do have professional judgment within the body of knowledge of their subject area to determine an appropriate series of evaluation activities that would comprise the final 30% of a student's mark in a subject area. There is some discretion in terms of the weighting of that being less than 30% if need be and in the best interest of the student. We will be working with schools through the leadership of their principals between now and the end of the semester to ensure that the practices, assessment and evaluation practices we put in place are in the best interests of all students. Thank you.
Further questions, Student Trustee Hessler, does that, did that answer your question, or were you looking for any more specific information?
Thank you, and through the chair, yes, I do believe that answered my question.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Any further questions from trustees? Seeing none, we'll go to Vice Chair Danko. You did have a motion, so if you want to, just to re-jog trustees' memories, the discussion was around, so previously, trustees will recall that we had passed a motion in August and then in October 26th with regards to approving the $9 million originally brought forward by Trustee Paul Tutt, that those funds be used. First, it was to reduce class sizes in kindergartens in grade 4 to 8. And then in our October motion, we added with a focus on high priority needs across all grades. And Vice Chair Dinko, if you could just read out what the amendment would be.
Thank you. So the motion would be to reaffirm our commitment that you just highlighted. And if these in-person classroom conditions are met, that staff be authorized to use part of the remaining funds to minimize the impacts of the transitions to remote where there are class size challenges.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder so we can get this on the floor. Trustee Buck.
Sorry, point of clarification. Would the motion be specifically to support transitions from only to remote or back and forth? Because that was the wording. I just want to understand the motion.
Absolutely. Vice Chair Danko.
Thank you. And through the chair, our current motion allows staff to spend funds if they need to add a teacher to support transitions to in-person already. So this just provides flexibility for addressing the remote class size challenges and in potential transitions or reorganizations that could be required with the influx of those transitions.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the motion on the floor, and just to clarify, Trustee Miller, because it was a point of clarification, you do still get to speak should you want to. And so with that, I'll go to speakers list. Do we have anyone on the phone that would like to speak? I'll open up broadly, and if there's more than a handful of people, we will. Oh, sorry. Yes, Vice Chair Danko is the mover and gets to speak to it first. Please do.
Thank you. Just briefly, again, trustees, I'm just putting forward this motion for consideration, recognizing that we have a number of challenges that we've been facing, that trustees have allocated funding, and that's made a significant difference in our ability to have lower class sizes in person, and there's still flexibility for staff to support changes or shifts to in-person with the funds that are outstanding. Recognizing there's not a lot of remaining funds, just $1.9 million. We're hearing in this report tonight that there are some pressure points in terms of class sizes for remote school, and we are seeing more students transitioning to remote than to in-person. So the intent of this is just to provide some flexibility for staff as they need it, to try to minimize any type of reorganization of classes or that type of action, because we've seen how disruptive that can be for students and staff. So my hope is that this is just support stability in the system and provides additional flexibility if staff need it.
Thank you. So I'll start back on, you know what, I'm just going to go through the speakers list online. Trustee Archer, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't.
Trustee Bingham?
No, I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Trustee Deeth?
No questions. Thank you.
Trustee Paikin-Miller, I don't believe has rejoined. Trustee Tutt?
No question. Thank you.
Thank you. For those in the room, questions? Okay, so we'll go straight to a vote. Those online, is there anyone voting against? Hearing none. Those in the room, anyone voting against? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you, trustees. With that, we do need to still move the report. It has, sorry, to vote on it. Yeah, so we're gonna vote on the report. So for trustees on the line, is anyone voting against the motion to approve the report? Hearing none. Is there anyone in the room voting against the motion to approve the report? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you, trustees. So we'll now move on to item number 15A, Standing Committee from November 9th, 2020. Just before I go into this report and turn it over to Vice Chair Danko, on this report is the naming committee report for 2 schools. Trustees will recall there was some comments made at the last meeting around the naming process with regards to some of the challenges with many of our schools, school communities receiving names after former property owners. And it came to my attention this past week that that our framework for naming schools did not go far enough. And in fact, we were not using an Indigenous lens when we were looking at the history and considering names for our schools. And that specifically, we were not looking at our First Peoples, who are rightfully the First Peoples of the land, and that our historical process was not going back all the way as it rightfully should. So I wanted to inform the board that those comments were received by myself, passed as well as by the director, and that there are changes that will be coming into play. That does not require a change in policy, but simply a correction to what already exists within our policy. So staff are able to operationalize that. I do know that that we do have a trustee that will be asking some questions around this process tonight. But I think what we'll do is, just before we jump into the report itself, is I'm just going to ask trustees if is there any questions with regards to ensuring that we are using an Indigenous lens when we are doing the school naming process or any policies and practices. So I'll go to trustees on the line. I'll just ask, is there anyone that's wanting to ask a question?
Yes, Trustee Bingham here.
Trustee Bingham, if you could please speak.
Yes, thank you. So through the chair, it had been brought to our attention, my attention for sure, and basically having the having to look through an Indigenous lens seems to be a bit of a challenge for a lot of people in this, in everything that we do at the board. And my big one that was brought to my attention was we do a land acknowledgement, but we didn't acknowledge the land or the peoples when we were speaking on of the history of the lands for the school. And that brought me back to the land acknowledgement and to equity and to governance. And there's so many things that are around it, because when you look at the land acknowledgement, we talk about the land and we need to acknowledge everything about it. We talk about the Wampum Belt and we need to acknowledge it's not so much equity, it's walking beside each other. When you look at the definition of spoon with the Wampum Belt, the whole thing comes down to we have two different worlds that we live in. The Indigenous have the ways that they've always done things, and there's the Europeans. And the two lines on that belt represent walking beside each other, not necessarily on an equity basis, but just walking with each other through these lands, through these worlds, and we really need to be more aware of that, even in our governance, as we're looking through everything that we do, through our policies, procedures, everything. We need to be talking to our Indigenous staff. We need to be making sure that everything is there. So my big question is, how are we going to look through an Indigenous lens if we don't really understand what it's about, without truthfully going directly to those who do have that knowledge? I do say I am comforted with knowing that we have an elder in the meeting. It really does reflect, for me in particular, that we are truly, sorry, this is really near and dear to me. It reflects that we are seeing and hearing that we need to make the change, that we do have those with that Indigenous lens sitting in that meeting, listening to these things, talking about these things. We need to know their knowledge more. We need to take what they can give us and really work from that as a framework. So my my question is, how can we do this? My hope is that we can do this, and that if we don't have the right questions, please accept that maybe that the staff would be able to say, that's not quite the question you could be asking. Here's a way that you can ask to get more understanding of how we could possibly do those things. I know that was kind of rambling, but for me, it's very, very important that we actually have an understanding of what it looks like in Indigenous lands with absolutely everything that we do, right from the trustees on down to staff and students through the whole process. So I guess my question is, how can we do this? How are we going to be able to truly see through an Indigenous lens in everything that we do? Thank you.
Thank you. Through to the director.
Thank you, through the chair. And I want to talk about sort of the call to action through this discussion. Two clear things. I think it's number one that this policy does need to be reviewed, and it's on the January work plan to review. But regardless of that, we have 2 schools being named in the consultation process out right now. I think one thing we should be very clear about, we can influence in the procedures when we think of bringing the historical lens of the land. And I think if we unpack the word historical, the root word is history. And when you look at the word history, it means his story. So whose story is being told when you unpack the word historical? And one thing we should be bringing is to the advisory committees to understand that the ancestral lands, the historical ancestral lands that the school buildings sit on, and we can work with our Indigenous, we can work with the Indigenous community to understand, and they can help us unpack clearly prior to being a farmland, what was this land? Who were the people of this land where this school was built? So that's a call to action. And of course, I think it needs to be grounded in that when we have the community think about the possibilities of the names. And regardless of the name they do choose, the advisory committee, I think we should be able to interrupt to understand not only not the historical lands, but go further and deeper around the ancestral lands that our buildings sit on. So those are 2 calls to action through the policy, and then by working with the Indigenous community regarding unpacking and getting clarity around the lands, ancestral lands our schools sit on. Through the chair.
Trustee Bingham, does that respond to your question?
Yeah, that's wonderful to be able to start with. I think being able to talk to the community about how else we can do these when it's this policy in particular, that's excellent. I'm glad it's coming back so quickly in January. That it can actually be discussed, and if we could have a few my hope would be that we could have someone from that Indigenous community sitting in on the committee meeting as well, so that we can really they can have an understanding of where we're taking this as well. So, thank you. That's a great start for the time being. Thank you,
Director Figueredo. I don't know why I said that. Thank you. What I meant to say was just turning back to the trustees on the phone. Was there anyone else, if you want to just speak up and I will identify you. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to this issue on the phone? Hearing none, yep. Did I hear someone?
Sure. Yeah, it's Kathy.
So Trustee Archer, please speak.
We need the proper information. We need to have, the board has to rely on people that have the right information. When it comes to native land in this area, we need to have the right information. Bimbrook, Stony Creek. There are people in the community that have the proper information. I attended an event a couple of years ago where the information came from someone that was from North, and it wasn't the proper information for here, and I just don't know how to get that across. And I'm glad that Christine spoke up. And thank you.
Thank you. And I think Director Figueredo, I'm not sure if you want to re-highlight, but we are committed to working with HWDSB staff in conjunction with our community partners, such as the Friendship Center and other organizations. But Director Figueredo, did you want to speak further, or has those points been covered? I'm seeing his head nod. So those points have been covered. Thank you for reiterating and echoing that, Trustee Archer. Trustee, so I'll turn now to trustees in the room. Trustee Galindo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So by coincidence, I watched a 2-hour lecture on wampum diplomacy prior to tonight's board meeting, and I did want to echo a few of the comments that Trustee Bigham made, which is, one, our system of governance, and by ours I mean Western culture system of governance and political institutions, is completely different than the culture and system of governance that Indigenous peoples have lived by for hundreds of years. And I think because of those fundamental differences, there's no way for both systems to, merge is the word I'm looking for. So with that in mind, my fear is always around tokenism. I certainly want there to be an Indigenous focus in our selection process. I just don't know what that looks like. And I really want to hear from our Indigenous partners and our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Community Advisory Committee to see what they think would be good methods or proposals or even recommendations for how we can include or have an Indigenous focus in our naming process for schools. Going back to that tokenism piece, the reason I say that is because, one would think that an obvious solution would be, well, simply start naming schools after Indigenous words or meanings, similar to how the Catholic Board does it after saints, and they have some kind of predetermined list. But again, without consultation with our Indigenous partners, that at the end of the day just ends up being, tokenism on my part for being ignorant and not, seeking advice and input from the community itself. So, and I'm mindful that the recommendations that we get might actually warrant an entire reconstruction of our current school naming process to be inclusive of those recommendations. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this, which is I'm not an expert, but I certainly want to listen and learn to see what we can do to essentially be innovative on this, because I'm not aware of what other school boards are doing in Ontario, but maybe that's something else that we could look at too, to see if there's other boards that have figured out a solution for how they can integrate that Indigenous focus in their naming process. But as Chair of Policy Committee, I'm certainly looking forward to having those discussions.
So Trustee Galindo, I'm going to get you to move a motion to extend by 30 minutes and seconded by Trustee Buck. Thank you for raising your hand. Director Figueredo, did you have any comments back, or are you just? So Director Figueredo has noted the comments. One follow-up, tiny follow-up.
One last thing. Sorry, I apologize about the comments I was making. The reason I think it's hard for us to have discussions like this is because in the geography, I'm trying to say it properly, and within the geographic parameters of Canada, there are over 60 unique Indigenous languages that are spoken just in Canada as a country alone, which makes it difficult, I think, to engage in those discussions. So anyways, I just forgot to say that, and I thought it was an interesting fact that everyone should know.
Appreciated. Anyone else that would like to speak? Thank you very much. It was important for us to be able to have that conversation. I know it was a bit outside of the normal agenda process, but if we are honoring our commitment to to equity, to anti-Indigenous racism, to our commitment to honoring the land. And this was a conversation that had to be had. So with that, I will now turn to Trustee Danko to bring forward the report.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm happy to bring the Standing Committee report from November 9th. We received a number of written delegation submissions regarding the naming of Memorial School. We also had some reports from staff. The first was the naming committee report for Memorial Stony Creek, and that is for the new elementary school at the Memorial Stony Creek site that should be opening January 2021. Recommended names were brought forward, and on the motion of Trustee Galindo, the Standing Committee recommends that the new elementary school at the Memorial Stony Creek site be named South Meadow Elementary School. You'll see item 5, we had a naming committee report for Greensville for the new elementary school at the Greensville site that is currently under construction and expected to open January 2021. And 3 names were brought forward by the School Naming Advisory Committee, and on the motion of Trustee Tutt, the Standing Committee recommends that the new elementary school at the Greensville site be named Greensville Elementary School. We also had a presentation on the effective communication report was presented by Manager McKillop. He presented the report for the 2019-2020 school year, and I'll just briefly summarize that the report included a review of the implementation of our annual plan, effective communication, and the draft strategies for 2020-21 annual plan for effective communication. They highlighted the effective communication roadmap and provided some highlights in communication planning from 2019-2020 for the number of things that we've gone through, including the Safe Schools Bullying Prevention Interview Panel, an intervention panel, and COVID-19 communication. And they also shared information about the analytics for our website and media exposure. Manager McKillop shared the vision for communications and engagement at HWDSB and shared that the goal of the plan for communication is to create a culture of communications and engagement through the implementation of strategic directions. They outlined strategic communications and engagement plan with 5 priority areas: leadership, staff ambassador, digital engagement, student outreach, and partnerships. There's also the digital engagement priority was outlined with 4 parts, including the digital platforms, citizenship, digital storytelling, and feedback through thought exchange. We heard about a strategy that would standardize digital platforms to improve communication, and there's a list of approved platforms listed in the report. Manager McKillop shared that staff did not meet the target to implement year 2 of the 2018-21 Strategic Communications and Engagement Plan due to provincial labor sanctions and, of course, the global pandemic. So their goal is to continue to improve internal and external communications, and staff will continue to implement year 2 of the Strategic Communications and Engagement Plan. With that, I would like to move the report.
Thank you, Trustee Danko. Looking for a seconder to approve the report. Trustee Galindo, thank you. With that, to trustees in the room, do we have any questions from our Committee of the Whole board meeting? Or Standing Committee? Seeing none. To those on the phone, do we have any questions for the Standing Committee? Hearing none, so we'll start with a vote to approve. Those on the phone, is anyone dissenting? Hearing none, those in the room, is anyone dissenting? Hearing none, motion approved. Thank you. Turning again to Trustee Danko, item B, the actual Committee of the Whole report from November 23rd.
Thank you, and through the chair, it is my pleasure to present the report of the private session of the Committee of the Whole held earlier this evening. That the Audit Committee report from November 12th, 2020 be received, that the Governance Committee report from November 2nd, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. And a seconder Trustee Miller. So do we have any questions from trustees in the room? Hearing none. Any questions from trustees on the phone? Hearing none. We'll go to a vote. Is anyone voting against the motion to receive the report for trustees on the phone? Hearing none, we'll ask the question to those in the room. Anyone dissenting? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Thank you. Oral report, student trustee report. Student trustee Hessler.
Thank you. And through the chair, we present our oral report in regards to Student Senate. So Student Senate has met virtually on October 28th and November 11th. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 25th. At the November 11th meeting, we took part in a discussion with the Safe Schools bullying panel, and this had a focus on positive school environment and anti-bullying precautions. Students, and it aims to hold a virtual take the lead in early 20 in early next year. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other, no further reports at this time? Questions? Do we have questions from trustees on the phone? Do we have questions from trustees in the room? Hearing none, thank you very much for bringing forward your report. Item 16B, Director's Report.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll be brief. Before the initial board meeting, usually this is the time where I sort of do year in review, year from December to December. And I just want to put on from December to December the gratitude I have for all staff at HWDSB who's overcome some really big obstacles. One, the labor action that we experienced from January till March, then the ministerial order, and then the reopening during a pandemic. But I think it's important, if there's one thread that needs to be threaded through all this, when you think about our strategic priorities, even throughout this, we've opened 5 new schools, 3 more to come this January, which is incredible. And I want to highlight something through all those. When you think about the worker partnerships, how we had to pivot from the number of partners we had to working virtually with our partners to provide opportunities. You just saw the effective communication work that Sean and his team is leading on our behalf, and the pivoting with our digital tools, especially Parent Portal, the challenge it's there, but our commitment to working through that as a one-stop shop for parents. And then you think about I would say our 2 most important priorities that are grounded in students: positive culture and well-being and student learning achievement. You'll see our student learning achievement report coming November 30th to program committee, where we were making some great gains in our reading and in the impact of the pandemic, but how our graduation rate continues to increase and grow. And you'll get a preview of what we still need to continue to work on. But I want to land with positive culture and well-being. We always say that it's foundational, but more than ever, this pandemic has highlighted what we need to focus on and be courageous to focus on. If we think of the lens, use the equity lens to filter through all those 5 priorities, the question we need to have is to sort of raise our level of consciousness, shared with me today by one of our superintendents. How are we going to raise our level of consciousness when it comes to the work of equity, that it's a thread throughout, it's not an afterthought, it's by design, and are we going to be courageous to learn and unlearn, and then to act on this work. So as you see the work moving ahead, you're going to see more courageous work, I know personally from myself, sort of what I'm called upon to work on as we move forward through the senior leadership team and through our leaders, because the voices we're not hearing, we have to hear. And as I was told by an excellent practitioner in one of our schools who I had a chance to speak to for 2 hours last week, she says it's simple. We have to understand our own lived experience, but not let our lived experience be the bias that gets in the way. How do we just stop to listen to the stories of each student, take the time, and then decide how we need to respond? And the expertise exists. She's reminded me the expertise exists every day in our classroom. The students will tell us through their stories what they need. So as we move forward, you'll see that continue to be a theme. And I want to close with thanking all staff who have done an incredible job to this date to get us to this point. But the work ahead of us is going to even be more courageous. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. To those on the phone, do we have any questions? Hearing none. Any questions from the room? Hearing none. We'll move on to the final report, Chair's report. So tonight, I am going to announce that this is my last board meeting as chair, and I will not be seeking re-election as chair at our next board meeting, the initial board meeting. It's been a deep honor and privilege to serve as your chair for the past 2 years. When I was thinking back today, it's hard to believe that it was just 2 years ago that I was sitting in Trustee Bingham's kitchen where we were already talking about succession planning. We were talking about the vulnerability that our board faces when you have a single chair for an entire term. We were talking about the ideas that we wanted to build a board that was inclusive, supportive, having mentorships, collaborative, that those were the values and culture that we wanted to build in this boardroom. And it was at that time that when I began talking to all the newly elected trustees and returning trustees that I had intended to have a 2-year term. 2 years ago, we had all of our committees run by women trustees. And then last year, I saw the succession plan start to evolve, was filled with pride when I saw 3 of our newly elected trustees step into the position of committee chair, continuing along the succession planning. It's hard to believe that it was only 2 years ago on December 3rd, 2018, that we had our swearing-in ceremony, because we have come such a long way. It's been a long journey. We have navigated many choppy waters, and more recently, I would say a storm with the pandemic. When I look back, I think about how this Board of Trustees rose to every occasion, and this organization overall. I think about how when we were started this term in 2018, we faced budget cuts. We faced budget cuts to the current year budget, and how trustees stood up and defended public education, defended our students, defended our collective agreements. We moved money within our budget in order to ensure that our classes for our secondary students weren't cut and that pink slips weren't given out. We weathered further storms when Trustee Chris Parkinson passed away. We weighed heavily in this boardroom whether or not we would have an appointment or a by-election, and we were thrilled to welcome Trustee Miller to the boardroom. And the following fall of the first year, and a full year had not even been completed yet, we faced as the board a most tragic and horrific event where one of our students died on our school site. We stood with our communities at the candlelight vigil. We poured out our grief. We attended en masse with Hamiltonians flooding in across the city to the football game. That was bittersweet. We made commitments to the community. We vowed to do better. We vowed that this would never happen again. We heard the generations of grief and pain of bullying, and we sought to create a bullying review panel, one that would have input from everyone across the city who wanted to be part of the process. We, in the winter, we faced strikes. We faced strikes because our provincial government could not reach a deal with our unions. And trustees and staff stood with our teachers, our educators, as well as our other employees. We joined them and stood with them on the picket lines. We joined them with our parents and our students and our community members who were outraged that the deal had not been reached, who were concerned about the proposed increases to class sizes, that were concerned about all the changes that were rapidly coming to education. And just when deals were beginning to be reached, I think all of us will forever remember Friday the 13th, Friday, March 13th, will forever be burned into our brains and to our minds as we entered the pandemic. And at first we thought that it would be an additional 2 weeks, and then it extended into a month, and then until the end of June. And then from June, it became the summer. We, as a board, saw a huge transformation within education. We saw this board rise to the challenge where we became the first in the province to strike a deal with Apple, the first in the province to get tech out to all of our students, including tech with data, equity, and ensuring that our students had access to resources has always been at the top and forefront of our minds, and that is why we were able to pivot and act so quickly. As the pandemic continued, that's where you saw this board take more action, where we passed moving $9 million out of our reserves. We were the second in the province, and that was a huge financial risk. And I think that we sometimes forget the courage to take that step that we did at the time. We did that in order to reduce class sizes. We did that in order to ensure that we had distancing according to the advice of Hamilton Public Health. We were one of the first boards in the province to pass masks for all grades to better ensure health and safety among our students, especially in this community where we face higher rates of the spread of COVID. We took a highly political risk of delaying school reopening. I think many of us were concerned about how that would be received by our respective communities. But because we had been communicating the whole way through, our communities understood and felt listened to, that we shared their concerns about the school system being ready in light of all the changes that were being handed down to us from the provincial government. In June, we became one of the second boards in Ontario to cancel the police liaison program. This was one of the most significant votes I believe this board has ever made, certainly in my tenure over the past 10 years as a trustee. What many individuals in the community do not know is that the board, Vancouver Board of Education, had the exact same vote on the exact same night as we did and had the exact opposite outcome. I pride ourselves on listening to our community, more importantly, listening to ourselves and turning in and looking to do that, the work to understand how we can best support our students. I think it's important to note that that was a challenging conversation for this board. Discussions around race and racism can be very difficult. And this is an area that we need to continue to work on. We need to continue to work on how we hear each other and how we want to be heard. And we are continuing that work with the governance review. We are continuing that work with anti-racism, anti-oppression training. And certainly in this boardroom, even tonight, where there's discussions around how we truly acknowledge the land, that to me is all symbolic of some of the changes that we are actively trying to make. I can't make a closing statement without acknowledging Student Trustee Metis. Student Trustee Metis was and is a member of our team who brought very serious concerns forward that continue to be investigated. I want to make the statement that Ahona is HWDSB, that the concerns that any member of our team, any student, any staff, any individual raises, that they are all our concerns, that we are responsible for each other. I think that we have navigated some very challenging issues as a board of trustees, but also as an organization. And we certainly have much more work to do. We know that we're having some very significant reports coming forward to us in the new year. We have the anti-bullying review. We have the review of the police liaison program. We also have other reviews coming forward as well. I think when we look back, hindsight is always 20/20. And as we've gone through some tough challenges, what matters most is that we continue the commitment to do what is right and to bring always a personal experience to these matters. What matters most is that when an educator is interacting with a student, that the student feels valued. What matters most is when our director is communicating to our parents out into the community, that when they open the newspaper, they feel valued and heard, and that they feel a personalized message of care and profound concern and a structured plan that gives them confidence that we have the ability to make our way forward even though it's uncharted territories. What matters most is how we treat each other. These are the memories that carry us forward. It's not going to be a specific data set or a policy or a protocol. It's how we are human with each other, how we interact with each other. And with that, I think it's important to note that as we won't always get things right, what matters most is that the greatest shame is not that we got something wrong, but rather if we miss the opportunity to make a difference, to take that as a learning opportunity. I want to thank a variety of individuals. I want to thank my mentors. Specifically, I I couldn't miss thanking my mother, who is board chair of Blue Water School Board, for her guidance and mentorship. I want to thank David and Denise Christofferson for being huge mentors to me, both personally and professionally. I want to thank Kathleen Hitchley, as well as Kika Ojo, who have both been huge parts of my own professional development and training, especially over these last few months as I served as chair, helping me to better understand anti-racism, as well as helping me to better understand how I can support parents, students, staff when it comes to conflict management and finding healthy outcomes. I want to thank some of my additional mentors, Madeline Levy, Don Quincy from Hamilton Health Sciences, who works in the James Street Student Center. And I also want to thank former student trustees and student senators, Libika and Rocksheim. I want to thank our community for all of your feedback, every email, every phone call. It has been an honor to hear from you, to bring your concerns forward to the boardroom. And I hope that you continue to contact all of us, as we need your feedback, we need your passion, and we need your advocacy for your children. That is what helps to guide our work. I want to thank all of our frontline staff, our educators, our caretakers, our office administrators. You have carried us through this pandemic. You have carried us through so many challenges. Thanks to your professionalism, thanks to your dedication. It is second to none. I want to thank our union presidents and their executives for the many, many phone calls that we've had. You have pushed me and helped me to consider many items from different lights, and I believe that I probably have done the same for you. I want to thank our executive council, and I want to equally thank all of your administrative assistants who have received hundreds of emails from me, especially over these last few months, as I work to connect you with constituents and parents who have concerns. I want to specifically thank Superintendent Nunn for all of your work during the strikes, during labor negotiations, for always thinking creatively outside the box, for ensuring and honoring this board's commitment to not breaking collective agreements, for all of your work in building relationships. That has gone such a huge way, and I see that specifically in the position of chair. I want to thank our associate directors, Peter Sovereign. I also want to thank Associate Director Stacy Zucker, again, going above and beyond. I'm not sure when the last time Exec Council has had a vacation, for always being on call every time I have an interview and I instantly need data on any issue. Anytime I'm going into a meeting with a community member, a community partner, you are always available day or night, which leads me to my next thank you, our communications manager, Sean McKillop. There is very few days that do not start and end with communication with Sean. Sean, you are on call 24/7. I think what I most appreciate is the flexibility, working together, articulating what I have myself found hard to articulate, finding those words. Back in the beginning days when we first were going through receiving all kinds of changes from the government and the media wanted instant answers, what was our position on board cuts? And we quickly learned that if we were not the first to come out with a message that, the media did their job and reported the message as they understood, what we decided is that we wanted to be the source of information. That meant having to be able to produce and come out with communications instantly, which is a lot of work. All those blue paragraphs that litter our social media feeds. And it's because of that work going above and beyond that ensured that that we had a direct line, and certainly myself as chair had a direct line to the community to ensure that our board's message was coming through strong and clear. So thank you, Sean, for all of your work. I want to thank Trustee Officer Miller. You are a godsend. The advice that you have given, the resource, the problem solving, reminders, thoughtful suggestions, working with me all of the challenges in terms of ensuring that not only are we abiding by board governance, but also ensuring that we're meeting what we want to be about, and in honoring, I would say, our desire as a team to bring everyone's voice in, that it's not always just all about the rules, that it is also very much about serving our purpose and our function. And to that, Trustee Officer Miller, I sincerely thank you. And of course, I want to thank our director, Figueredo. I think that it can easily be taken for granted, the relationship between the chair and the director. But as I've looked across the province, this relationship is not held with every chair and every director. And I think that that the relationship that we share, that we have behind closed doors, we have certainly pushed each other to think of situations differently, but we have also very much, we always walk out, I believe, stronger. I think we always walk out with a stronger sense of how we are going to work to support the board, both in this room and overall as an organization, to meet the needs of every student. It is a relationship that is based off trust. It is, you can't have those kinds of conversations without trust. You can't have those kinds of conversations without the faith that the other individual will take your advice, your comments, your feedback, and that they will fully consider them. That is trust, and work with them and continue to work with you over and over. And certainly we've had so many profound challenges over the year. I have appreciated everything that you do for this board. We are privileged to have you as a director. And I thank you for your consistency and the service that you give to all trustees, all staff, and all students. So thank you for that. Last but not least, in fact, I would say most importantly, I want to thank my fellow trustees. It has been my greatest honor serving you. I've had so much joy in this position. The phone calls that we've had, the debates, the conversations, the brainstorming, I have truly appreciated it. I think that my advice as we look ahead and we look at a number of challenges that we are still working our way through, COVID, the reports that are coming forward. And as mentioned earlier, I do feel that as a team, we became a bit lost. We became fractured in June. I think that all trustees around this table have felt that and have said that to me in one way or another. And I think that when we look at June, it is difficult to look yourself in the mirror. And I think that's what June was truly about. I would say that this isn't unlike any of the other challenges that we have been through as a board. That we need to continue to do what we've always done, which is to lean in. We lean into challenges. When I think of this board, we have always leaned into the challenge. We have always sought to evolve. We have always shown personal care, and we've always fought hard as a team to do nothing short but look for the best and fight for the best for our students. And so I want to remind you of the good work that we've done when faced with challenges, because I want to remind you what we're about. So again, when we were faced with budget cuts, we shifted our budgets. We worked hard to defend our students. We worked hard to prevent classes from being cut, from pink slips being given. We ordered data. We exposed, I would say, government plans and held them to account. When we were faced with the greatest tragedy, I would say that's when we really leaned in with our community. We were there with them, sharing their grief. When we had the strikes, again, we were with our staff and our community on the picket line. We were fighting for them in the boardroom. We leaned in. During the pandemic, again, we leaned into this challenge. We leaned into it. We sought to gather the voice from our parents, from our students, from our staff, and bring it to the boardroom. And I would say that, again, we're in a position where we need to lean in. Sometimes these messages are not easy to hear. And we don't like criticism. We don't like some of the hard feedback. But again, this is an opportunity to grow. And I have full faith in this Board of Trustees because I see the history over the past 2 years. I see how far we've come. And I know that we can do it again. So those are my comments. I do want to close by stating that it is these values, the values of leaning in, the values of fighting for what's right, that is the beacon for all 50,000 students across our system, their families, our staff. That is the beacon to them, the unwavering commitment, letting each and every one of them know that we are personally fighting and working for all 50,000 students, for all 7,000 staff, and for all families. That is our commitment. And that's why we show up here every Monday. And so I'll close with, I guess, the leader that inspired me most in my career with his quote. And what I hope is the spirit continues to motivate this board, which is the words of Jack Layton, that love is better than anger, hope is better than fear, optimism is better than despair. So let us be loving, hopeful, and optimistic, and we'll change Hamilton and the world together. Thank you.
Motion to extend meeting by 15 minutes.
I know. Sorry about that, guys. With that, that's everything. I look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Vice Chair Danko. Seconded by, Manny, you cannot raise your hand. Seconded by Trustee Miller and
left.
All in favor. Those on the line, anyone voting against? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.